All right, TV9, we're gonna get started here. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's Board of Selectmen meeting here, Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access this Board of Selectmen meeting. However, public comments and questions could be submitted to the board in advance of the meeting by completing the Google form prior to the meeting by Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021 by 4:30 p.m. Also, the meeting will be broadcast via live Seekonk Cable TV 9, streamed live on TV9's Facebook, and streamed live on the town of Seekonk's Facebook page. And I guess we were trying YouTube channel as well, but it wouldn't go in right now. Per Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 20F requires any person recording must notify the chairman at the beginning of the meeting. There's nobody that I am aware of right now. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can I please get a roll call vote? Or can I please get a roll call just for attendance amongst the board, please? Starting with how we sit in the room typically.
Adam Petronio, aye.
David Vieira, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Okay, can somebody please read the board and committee openings?
Volunteers are needed on the Board of Assessors, 1 Board of Selectmen appointment, Capital Improvement Committee, 2 Board of Selectmen appointments, Commission on Disability, 5 to 13 Board of Selectmen appointments, Economic Development Committee, 5 Board of Selectmen appointments, Energy Committee, 1 Board of Selectmen appointment, Historical Commission, 3 Board of Selectmen appointments, Parks and Recreation, 1 Board of Selectmen appointment, Recycling Committee, 3 Board of Selectmen appointments, and the Zoning Board of Appeals is in need of 2 alternates.
Okay, thank you. Committee speaks. I had some questions that were submitted, but they're going to relate to the asphalt discussion, so I'm going to hold on to them right now, and we'll include them in the asphalt discussion because there are some questions and things that were involved with that. So, general business, item A. Consider the request to amend an existing Class 2 motor vehicle license for Zuhair Sendian, gas on the run, 1075 Newman Ave, to include an adjacent parcel located at Assessor's Plot 27, Lot 40. Mr. Bedeen.
Mr. Chairman, as the board's aware, Gas on the Run had come before us. They were looking to expand their operation. They've got some improvements that are going on with the current lot, and they were looking to utilize the vacant lot on the side of them for the used car lot as well as the U-Haul lot. So that's what we have before us.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion?
I have a question. I'll make a motion just for matter of speaking.
Discussion?
Discussion.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion, Mr. Vieira.
Is this request going to stay in effect if granted after the renovations are completed at the existing location?
Yes, that's the intent. So with the new renovations, there weren't there's no longer any space for the used car lot or the U-Haul. So when they came before us, I believe last year or close to a year and a half ago, they had requested that they were going to make the alterations to the building and then move all the operations over to the that side lot.
Okay, so there will be no cars for sale at the existing lot, even after obviously the renovations have been completed, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, so why are we expanding the lot? Why aren't we just transferring the license that we have in place now to the vacant lot?
Because the actual office is still going to be utilized in the space that they currently have. So all the cars will be located on the separate dirt lot. Anybody looking to purchase a vehicle would have to, the actual business would be conducted in the building that they're currently in on Gas on the Run.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I would be inclined to support this article if we put a stipulation on that there would be no cars for sale on the lot that's being renovated after the renovations are completed.
Until after the renovations are completed?
No, after the renovations are completed, they're not allowed to sell cars from that lot. I shouldn't say not allowed to sell cars, but there'll be no cars for sale on that lot.
On the gas on the run lot?
That's correct.
Okay.
Am I missing something? Wasn't the original plan that came before us a while ago, didn't it entail U-Haul business increasing? And that's why they were looking to do a lot of these improvements there. And now we're talking about making the adjacent lot a used car lot? I thought that, I may be recalling
Yeah,
incorrectly, but I thought
As,
that was.
as I recall from that discussion, particularly when we were having the discussion back in the fall with the running of the gas line, I think it was the fall, right? Or
Yep.
spring, right? Or summer, yeah, middle of last year. The whole idea was that they were going to take over that lot, move the U-Haul and whatever car sales that they did have. So the car sales, I do recall as being a part of that discussion, but everything was good, was to go over to that empty lot. And, you know, especially while they were going through all the renovations and everything at the existing lot. I think this is just to transfer that license, basically extend the license from one property over to, over to the other. Is that they can now just do it, but it wasn't just, the U-Haul was the primary because it wasn't like they were selling a lot of cars, was my
Well,
understanding.
And now it looks like they're, based on the site plan that we have before us, and we look at the amount of parking spots that they're setting up there, it looks like they are. And I guess that's kind of the question, is the presentation that we had in the fall didn't have this level of detail, nor did it indicate that this was the plan. And I may be recalling it incorrectly, but I believe the discussion centered on U-Haul mainly. Maybe it did involve some used cars, but I mean, if you look at the number of parking spots that we're talking about on the plan, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 35, 45, almost 50 spaces.
That's a considerable amount of cars, used cars, especially when we limited the gentleman up the street on the other side of the railroad tracks as to how many cars he could have.
Mr. Chairman, I did allow the applicant to come over so he can speak on the issue if the board wants to ask him.
Great, thank you. Let's
please.
let him in here.
Can clear some stuff up.
Oop. Mr. Sendian,
Yes, I'm here.
hi, can you
Hi.
please discuss the request before us tonight, please?
We currently have 20 parking spots at the Gas on the Run.
Okay, how many cars are you currently selling on that lot? What's, can you kind of give us a little bit of a background in terms of what the intent is with the lot next door?
Things changed because of COVID. Before COVID, I had all these spots and I needed a little bit more than the 20 spots. Before COVID, the 20 spots I had were not enough to have all the used cars. That's why we're trying to expand to the lot next door to increase the amount of the used cars a little bit and not to lose the business from the used cars and the U-Hauls. So the lot's going to be shared between the two. I would like to increase the used cars as much as we can, because as I said, with the limited space we had at the Gas on the Run, you approved me for 20, but that wasn't enough. You might not see a lot of sales now. Again, it's just because of the current situation with COVID and the auctions are limited and all that stuff.
But Mr. Sendy, and I think my question is more, is the presentation that we had in the fall didn't involve as much of an emphasis on the used cars. And we're talking about maybe we're standing here maybe 4 months later and suddenly there's a shift away what appears to be, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, a shift away from the U-Haul, which was what was presented as the primary focus at the time, to now shifting
go on.
to 50, total of 50 spaces for used car sales.
No, that's the total for used cars and U-Hauls together. And I wasn't there in the fall on that meeting, so whoever spoke, he's misrepresented the thing.
I think it was your attorney that was there during those discussions.
Yes, the attorney was talking about the mostly the renovation at 1075, but he wasn't aware of the whole plan. The plan wasn't ready back then.
How many U-Hauls are gonna be, how many U-Hauls do you currently have, and do you plan on
Right
keep
now,
maintaining that, or are you gonna expand that?
we're gonna expand it a little bit. Yes, right now I have
So the
about
license is,
seven of them that assigned to this location.
so the license as it currently was issued, limited 20 cars on the current lot.
Mhm.
Yes, on 1075. Yes.
Of which, can you clarify, Sean, of which 7, did it say anything about the U-Haul or no?
No,
No.
Right. So you had how many spots originally, Mr., on that lot?
I had 20 for the used cars and 10 spots for other cars other than the used cars. That's what we're using the U-Haul.
Right. So now
So
we're going
I
from,
had in total 30 parking spots plus my customers and employees spots.
right. So now we're going from a total of 30 lots, and granted, I'll give you, you are purchasing or have purchased the lot next door, and you're gonna be
Yes.
doing that to the lot next door, but you're keeping, and you're adding 50 more.
No, we're not gonna keep the current parking spots after the renovation.
So the current renovation, just so that we're on the same page, the current renovation
Yes.
is going to take away all the parking space. So this lot on the side is also going to be utilized for parking for the convenience store?
No, the lot next door is gonna be taking the used cars and the U-Haul spots from 1075.
Okay. So you will
And
still
there
have,
is, and on the plan I submitted for the lot next door, there is still enough room if we need customers parking on the lot next door. But at 1075, where the gas station is, after the renovation, won't be any U-Hauls parked there or used cars. It might be a few spots for the customers for the store, yes.
so you're going from the current 30, where you're displaying 20 vehicles, to where this lot is now going to go increase 15 spaces to a total of 45. That will
Yes.
include, okay, so that will include your U-Haul, your
Yes,
rentals, and some potential spillover if you have the space.
yes.
Okay. And the existing 1075 lot, once you get done completed with your renovation there, how many spaces are going to be over there?
16.
Yeah, it looks like 16.
Yes, but these are not gonna be used for, again, for any U-Haul or used cars.
Yep.
Just strictly customers going
Only
into
the customers and employees. That's
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. Mr. Andrew, you look like you had another one.
No, it would have been nice to see this originally, what the master plan was when we were going through this a few months back. And I mean, I understand at this point, then, I mean, I would almost say that the motion be made so that way there would be no more used car sales or U-Haul sales or storage on the existing parcel. And that the proposed plan be approved but limiting it to, I mean, we had 20 on the other parcel, right?
Yes.
20 went down to 16.
What are you trying to get the number to? For used vehicle sales?
30.
That's a huge. Okay.
So 30 cars and 15 U-Hauls?
Yes.
I'm just not a fan of the piecemeal presentations over time. And it would have been nice to have a little bit of this heads up when we were looking at helping you out the way that we did with the paving of Newman Avenue.
Again, when the lawyer was talking about the renovation, the plans were not ready yet. Not even
But they were in the
not from
works.
the. Yes.
I think that's my point. They were in the works.
Yes.
I mean, so I mean, I looked through and I see that you have stipulations from conservation, and I believe conservation's on the call tonight, but how are we, this is gonna be a paved lot, and so how are we?
No.
You're just gonna,
No.
Oh.
All the work we did in the lot next door was approved, and I'm still working with Jennifer at conservation. It's gonna be just. It's already done. It's just gravel only, and the fence is almost done around the back side of it.
yeah, I see
So,
that. I see the
Je-
proposed split rail fence.
Yes, Jennifer is aware of exactly what's going on. She goes by almost every morning and doing everything according to her conditions.
Mr. Sullivan,
Mr. Viera,
I've got some concern here. I mean, every parking lot we have in the south end of town, all the way to the north end of town, has to be paved, as well as oil water separators.
Yep.
Why are we allowing a gravel parking lot with no oil water separators? And I don't want to speak for conservation, but we looked at that property one time to build the North End Fire Station. The river runs right through that area, right along the back of that property. Matter of fact, that's part of the aquifer district. So why are we allowing that? I guess that question would be for Jennifer, and I'm not questioning her. I have the same concerns that Mr. Andrade has. I mean, I was under the impression, unless I missed something, the last time we talked about this, that parking lot was going to be used, or the gravel parking lot was going to be used on a temporary basis until the renovations were completed to the existing location. Maybe I missed something,
I
but
don't think you're confused in that, Dave, because if I recall correctly, and again, I may be wrong, part of why we were so amenable to moving to phasing the paving of the road is that we were going to be addressing drainage as well and tying into drainage.
right. So,
And if we were doing that for that other project, and if we had known about this other parcel, you had the opportunity to tie drainage into the drainage system.
well, that's what I'm saying. There's no oil water separators in this proposed lot. There's no drainage, as you just said. It's a gravel lot. Why are we approving something like that?
So I think the oil water separator is needed for repairs. So originally, I think in the other lot, he was looking to do repairs. Are you doing repairs in this current lot?
No repairs whatsoever.
Okay.
But that doesn't address the
No,
drainage.
I just wanted to make sure that
Yep.
that was still consistent.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sean, is Jen on right now? Can we just get her on real quick to answer some of these questions that are probably in her?
We can.
Hello.
Hey, Jen.
Hi, how's everyone doing?
Good, how are you? I know we got you on for something else tonight, but do you mind kind of answering some of the questions that the board has here?
Sure, not at all. So both of these projects, 1075 Newman and the vacant lot next door, have gone through conservation. They both have orders of conditions, so they're both a notice of intent permit process. 1075 Newman went through the peer review process, and that's kind of how we got to where we did with tying into the existing drainage and doing improvements to that, right? That'll all be scheduled ahead of future paving on that roadway. For the vacant lot, it's a little bit different considerations, right? 1075 is fully developed. It's all asphalt right now, that whole lot. For 0 Newman, the unimproved one, I shouldn't say unimproved, part of it is already disturbed from a conservation perspective. So yes, there is a river that runs behind it, Dave, you're completely correct in that. But that lot has already been developed and that it's been cleared up to that tree line, right? So we're actually getting a betterment out of this project from a conservation perspective in that behind that fence line, there's going to be some restoration work closer to the riverfront area. So the way conservation looks at it is there's no new disturbance within the 100 feet of the riverbank, and you can have up to 10% disturbance from the 100 to 200, or up to what was already disturbed. That lot already has quite a bit that's been cleared. So the fact that they're putting gravel on it really isn't that different from the compacted soil that was there before, from a conservation perspective. I understand that you all might have different concerns in terms of the number of cars that will be on it.
Yep. And I think that's kind of where this conversation is going towards. It's a lot of vehicles now going from the 20 on a paved surface to now going to, oh, where did my screen go? Sorry. To now going to 30, from the sounds of it, between used cars and U-Haul, 40 with a few overflow spaces. That's a big difference in what's being requested. Is that dashed line that I see, Jen, is that a buffer zone that the stone is going over?
I can't see the screen that you can.
Oh,
I just see
sorry,
you guys.
I was looking at the
Yeah, let me see if I can do a screen
sheet
share.
1 of 1, which is the proposed lot plan.
Is that the one you were looking at, Dave?
Yeah,
I can. No, I'm looking at the other one, Sean. Keep going.
This one?
That one. You see the dashed line right when you get onto the lot. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parking spots that have on the left-hand side that have that dashed line going through them at a slight radius.
Yep.
Is,
Well, that'll
is
be
that,
the 200, that should be the 200-foot riverfront. I can't read it on my screen, but if my recollection is correct, that's the 200-foot.
okay?
Jen, you're correct. It's the 200.
I was just curious. All right. So I guess my concern is just the number of vehicles going from a paved lot with drainage and improvements that were made for to capture the drainage to now going on an unpaved lot. But that's just me.
The previous lot didn't have an oil water separator either, though.
No, I didn't bring up the oil water separator, and
Okay.
Sean's right.
no, I did.
It is required for repair facilities.
Right. So, it's not that I disagree with you that, Dave, that should be a concern about cars being so close to that river, but we have to work within the confines of the regulations, and they're meeting the standards for us. They're meeting the regulations. So it was already a cleared lot that had cars parked on it, granted not 50 from time to time. And they're basically just adding gravel to it and increasing the number of cars that'll be on it. But our regulations from a conservation perspective don't deal with cars.
Agreed, but that's where we as members of the Board of Selectmen can take any limitations that you may have from your parameters that you have to work with, and can in turn not increase the number of vehicles to the extent that's being requested, which would only further impact what is already a not, in just my opinion, a not ideal situation of a used car lot on gravel next to a riverfront. So I know where I stand.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything?
I do, Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Viera?
Jen, I understand where you're coming from the conservation standpoint. And we talk about that lot being used for parking now from time to time. But again, it wasn't on a regular basis. There were vehicles parked there sporadically. Tractor trailers from time to time used to park there overnight. But now we're talking about putting upwards of 40 to 45 cars or U-Haul vehicles on that lot. I don't know if it's a good match. That's just me. I'm concerned with the river. Again, we need to do something, and I know you're well aware of that to protect the river and the environment. And that's where I'm coming from.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant has raised his hand. He's looking to speak.
Yep. Mr. Sandian?
Yes, can I just mention that as far as the U-Hauls, they are not coming to the either property unless they are fully maintained and checked for all kind of leaks. And same as for the used cars, we are not allowed to sell any car unless it passes the inspection. That's the state law. So every car is going to be parked on that lot is going to be fully inspected before it makes it to the lot. Fully maintained, fully inspected.
Could I ask one more question of Ms. Miller? Ms. Sullivan?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Andrew.
Would it be, and I understand the parameters you have to work with, but would it be better in your opinion, from a conservation standpoint, if that lot were paved?
If that lot was paved, it would require stormwater. And that would get into a completely different ballgame in my viewpoint, right? It would be kind of like the one next door, right? Where they are all asphalt at 1075 Newman and couldn't come up with a stormwater treatment facility on site and are tying into existing and upgrading. So if that lot was asphalted, is it better in that you can have some sort of stormwater treatment? Yes, but what they're looking to do on that lot wouldn't require us to kind of
No, I
regulate
understand
them
that.
from gravel to asphalt.
Yep, no, I understand that. But there's nothing that prohibits them from tying into the existing stormwater drainage system that they had to put in for the lot next door, or that they have to put in for the lot next door.
Right.
So I guess that's kind of where I'm going. If you are limited by the regulations, but we have the ability to meet the request of the applicant by increasing the number of vehicles, but in doing so require that the lot be paved and that they tie into the drainage system that they're providing for the other lot. In my eyes, it's a win-win.
And Ms. Miller, if they pave it and they tie into the stormwater, excuse me here, my conservation knowledge here, but if they were to pave it and tie into the stormwater drain or the upgrade that they're putting in, that's a better situation here.
It's better in theory. It depends on, so that particular site and 1075 Newman have closed out RTN. So there is a previous history of spills on that site from being a gas station over the years, so prior to Gas on the Run. And so depending on where the soil disturbance is, that could create more issues for us. And that's part of why 1075 Newman is tying into the stormwater system that's existing.
Right, but if they, and again, forgive me, but if they do disturb soils and they don't move it from the site, they encapsulate on site, isn't that within their powers?
They would probably be looking at, I mean, depending on where they're disturbing, right? I don't know where their system would tie in and capture enough drainage and all that from the different parking spaces on the lot.
Right.
That
And I
gets
don't
into a
have an
whole
accurate-
stormwater analysis.
I don't have an in-depth site plan here in front of me, but
Yeah,
it looks like you've got multiple tie-in points for the drainage, if what I'm looking at is accurate. So, I mean, it almost looks like you have the ability to tie right in, but I just don't see how leaving it unpaved and increasing the number of vehicles is a good idea when we have the ability to pave it and tie it into the existing drainage system. And if it means that there's some remediation that needs to be done for removed soils, you're not talking about a lot of removed soils when you're talking about putting in a drainage pipe below grade. It's not like you're moving earth around for a foundation system. So I would then turn to the applicant and ask the question, what do you want more vehicles? Or to not pave the lot?
I can't afford to pave the lot. If the increase in the vehicle gonna be a problem, I'll just leave it the way it is. All I'm trying to do is just to keep the business I built over 5 years, because the renovation gonna eliminate these two things. And losing these gonna make it more difficult for me to stay in business. It's gonna be a huge cost for paving and doing all the requirements that comes with it. I can't afford it. I'm trying to survive and stay in business, not the other way around.
Understood, but I mean, we still have to do things and I get your point and I'm sympathetic to it, but at the same time, we still have to try and do things the right way, right? And when we're being faced with a question where let's increase the number of vehicles on a paved lot, versus just paving the lot and tying into the drainage system that you're already installing, it doesn't make sense to me.
Mhm.
I'm one person.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I
From Mr.
concur
Chair.
with Mr. Andrade. I mean, we've got some choices here. And not only are we trying to do what's best for the environment, but we're trying to obviously help this individual stay in business. But we need to obviously be careful not to set precedent. There are a number of businesses up and down Newman Avenue, I'm sure up and down Route 6, that would love to have an unpaved lot, but they were forced for one reason or another to pave their lot. I mean, I don't think we should be granting any more vehicles, parking spaces, or whatever you want to call them, without some remediation, obviously, or some drainage in the area to protect the river. That's just me. That's my position.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Does that used car lot up the street, the JMac that we're talking about, that's not paved, right?
They haven't
No,
finished
it's not.
it yet. They haven't finished it yet. There was supposed to be a parking, there was supposed to be a building there. There was supposed to be all sorts.
Exactly.
Was that mandated to have, that was supposed to be paved out and everything on that with the terms you guys were around with that?
The plans that were presented at the time when the license was given, and if you recall from the license discussions we had, was that where's the building? Where's the improvements that were all part of the package here? And I think he asked for a little bit more time.
Yeah.
That's right. That's correct.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Zor.
I know I sympathize with the applicant. I know it's a huge expense to go through drainage and paving of that lot. I'm okay with as it stands right now. I'm sure the last thing this guy wants to do is be caught with oil dripping into the ground. And then that fine could quickly add up over what it would cost to redo the parking lot. As presented, Mrs. Miller is okay with how it is. I'm fine with the proposed plan in front of us.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Petronio, are you all set?
Just to clarify, this is a moving the existing class 2 license for the 20 vehicles over to the empty lot, correct?
And adding.
And adding vehicles.
But it
That
says a
was-
separate site plan was being used for the 45. So are we combining them
No,
on the cover page to this?
the
That's,
applicant.
I listened to all the conversation. I'm looking at the paperwork and it doesn't line up with what the discussion was.
As it stands,
It looks like it's an addition, and the reason it's only looking like an addition is because the actual business will be conducted out of the property on Gas on the Run. But all the cars, as explained, would be on the vacant lot.
So what is the license for?
So it's an
basically,
expansion.
go ahead.
No, it would be an expansion of the current license. I would just obviously make sure that we articulate that if the board's will to approve would be to make sure that the used cars and the U-Haul all be on the vacant lot or the lot map that was listed.
So the U-Haul rental, are those vehicles included in the overall license count?
No, so
I'm just trying to separate the two and understand it. So forgive my ignorance on that.
no, the applicant had mentioned he's looking for 45 spots on the vacant lot, so 30 for used cars and then 15 for U-Hauls.
So basically, we're shifting the license to the empty lot to store the vehicles, and we're upping it from 20 to 30. In my layman's terms.
That's the request.
Yes.
But changing the condition from a paved lot to an unpaved lot.
And we currently have car rentals, car sales in the town that are on unpaved lots. So I find that it would be unfair to the business owner to penalize them if we don't have a standard procedure that all these sales have to be on a standard lot. So I would then be inclined to agree with Mr. Zorro that I don't see any reason to deny this request.
I just would like to point out one quick point, if I could. Just because something's grandfathered and it's been around for 40 years doesn't mean something that's new should follow suit. A quick point.
It's true. And I do agree with you. I'm reluctant to go this way, but looking at the planning board's approval, they have the site, so planning board did vote in favor of this, and if I'm reading this correctly, right?
Yep.
Proposed automotive sales and U-Haul rental operation, 6-0. So and conservation is already dialed in on this, and they don't have there's nothing legal that can.
No, but I just don't want you to.
I get what you're saying, and
I know, I just don't want you to lose sight of it. It's within our purview to limit the number of vehicles if we feel we want to, or if we feel it's warranted.
Mr. Petronio offers a good point, okay? There are dealerships, small dealerships throughout the town that are probably on unpaved lots. However, how many of them abut a river? A substantial river at that, and the aquifer district. That's my concern.
But we're also getting from the previous proposal in the fall that we kept referring to, we're going to get the added benefit of the stormwater drainage and the upgrades, which is why we lifted that moratorium and did the phased approach in that area, correct?
Yeah, but that's only on the Gas on the Run, the existing lot now. Other than that, you're not going to have any drainage.
So are we shifting the problem? Are we solving one problem to create another? Would probably be my biggest question here.
That's the point that I'm bringing up. You're taking used vehicles that was once on a lot that did not have drainage and that no stormwater mitigation system could be put in place without being tying into the existing drainage. And now that's in the roadway. And now you're moving those operations and moving them to another lot that doesn't have any drainage or anything besides it being gravel and going directly into the ground.
I guess ultimately I'm trying to see where this goes here, right? So I guess the question before us is, he's asking to increase the number of vehicles on this lot and on an existing now unpaved lot. If you go from 20 to 45. Okay, even if at the end of the day, as the applicant is noted, he needs to expand it. He needs to push everything over to clear space for the new business or the renovated business, in addition to expanding what he's got. I guess I'm just kind of looking at this. I'm saying, even if we require him to pave it in order for him to get the 45 cars, he's not gonna be able to do it. So if you could say, hey, your existing license remains 20, are you still gonna require, I guess I'm trying to find out from you, Mr. Andrig and Mr. Vieira, are you gonna ask the applicant to pave the lot regardless if it's 45 or if it's 20 and just wants to slide it over?
Yes. Again, I'm going to go back to the statement that I just made. As part of the phasing in of the drainage and because there was no way to handle drainage on site, we accommodated the applicant to phase our paving of the roadway so that way he could tie into the drainage system. Now, with this request, because it's completely in our purview to say, absolutely not, we will not shift the 20 cars to the lot next door. But with this request, he's asking to pick up the problem that we just solved and now move it to a lot that doesn't have a solution. And that's why I say, in my opinion, and I'll be blunt with it, no matter whatever is proposed, as far as moving the vehicles to the lot next door or the number that's voted on, in my opinion, we should be requiring that adjacent parcel to tie into the drainage system that is readily available. It's not even like he has to do an easement or anything to gain access to it, because it's his own parcel. To tie into that drainage system and pave it. Problem solved. I understand it comes at an expense.
Yeah, I think what concerns me, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I guess what concerns me here is, if I'm understanding Mr. Sendian correctly, Mr. Sendian, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we require you to pave this lot, you said that your intent was just to leave the lot as is, and then you're not going to be able to sell cars on it, correct?
Yes, and just to be clear, I don't own both properties. So
Right.
it's not me tying to the same system. The 1075 and the proposed renovation is a completely different owner. I own the business there, but I don't own the property.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, but the point is still the same.
It's not the same because I'm not doing the renovation or the drainage system. The owners of the property of 1075 are the ones are funding that project.
But who owns the property, in my opinion, is immaterial.
Right.
If we're going to obviously ask that be done, it would be regardless of who owns the property. So the fact, sir, that you don't own the property, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't matter. I mean, my concern again, and I know I'm repeating myself, it's too close to the river in the aquifer district. If we pollute our water wells, we're gonna have a serious problem. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but we need to do everything in our power to protect our aquifer district.
Right.
It can be done in multiple ways. It can be phased, it can not be phased. I mean, at the same time, the applicant is looking to expand his business and improve upon his business, which is commendable and great, and I wish him the best of luck, and I'm happy that he's been successful. However, at the end of the day, when you, and maybe I'm reverting back to what I do for a living, if you can, if you want to build a building, you can't turn to the building department and say, I can't afford to put in the fire rated wall, let me put in a regular wall. And that's kind of where we have the ability in this instance where conservation was limited in what, if I, maybe limited is the wrong word, but it falls within the parameters of conservation. But we have the ability to, with the number of vehicles that we allow on the lot and the requirements that we require to have the vehicles on the lot, to improve upon a situation where that couldn't have been done elsewhere, even though it may have been wanted to. And I say may, I don't know for certain.
As a point of clarification, through you, Mr. Chairman, is
Yep.
the U-Haul rental currently in existence through that lot?
Mrs. Sendidian, if I believe.
Yes.
Said
Yes,
yes.
yeah, you asked me, yes.
Yes.
But the paved lot,
Yes.
right?
Okay. I guess, I'll be quite frank. I'm torn because this has already been planned. It's already been approved by planning and conservation. Ms. Miller stated that she's, they've got some betterments out of this. I'm concerned about, yes, I'm concerned about the environmental impacts, but I'm sure that, I'm sure that Ms. Miller, would have addressed that and at least made us aware to it. And I guess the flip side of this thing too is when I also think about, other car lots, and we're looking at going back to the one that's up the street that used to be a landscape lot. Now it's a car lot. Did we really do anything to improve the environment when we went from having landscape materials to putting used cars on it, right? If that's where we were going with all of this. I'm going to reluctantly agree. I think on this because because we've got planning approved, conservation approved. I'm going to reluctantly agree because while I understand Mr. Andrade's point of tying into this new unit, I'm going to reluctantly agree from my position on this to support the applicant's license. So,
Mr. Sullivan, if you look at the plans for, I guess is it GMAC or JMAC? Their plans addressed a paved parking area, as Mr. Andrade said, with a building. And if you recall, we obviously did bring the owner to task as to where's the building and what's going on with the paving of the lot. I mean, again, we did it there, or his plans obviously showed that. And down the road, we're going to allow the same thing to happen without.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, even if you don't approve him for his lot, so to speak, I mean, now we're going to raise the question, to sell cars on it. He's got a site plan approved by planning. So even if he's not going to use it for, selling cars, is there anything, unless there's a stipulation that he can't use it at all? Right? And that, because then he can just use it for overflow parking, right?
No. Who, I'm sorry.
The applicant?
Could
Mr.
use it for
Sendian?
overflow parking?
There's nothing preventing any vehicles from parking on an empty lot right now.
I
guess
mean,
you're right.
that was part of the discussion was that the intent is for him to use all those spaces for selling cars, but that, if he needed overflow parking and and space was available, that he would be able to use that. So
Yeah, no, you're right.
now we can tell him that he can't sell cars and can't use it for overflow parking?
Anyone can park there now. I
Yeah,
guess,
and
I guess I'm,
Exactly.
it's
I'm
on a limited
confused by-
basis too. It's not on a regular basis.
I'm just confused. Are you approving, in your opinion, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
You're good with 30 vehicles, or are you staying to 20?
I'm good with the 30 vehicles. I'm good with what the request is.
I was confused by what you were good with, so. all right.
Sorry, yes.
Actually, it's not 30 vehicles, it's 45.
It's a total of 45.
That's correct.
No.
Thirty.
The
But
request,
only 30 for the license. per se.
correct, 30 for
Yeah.
the license, 45 for parking spaces.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Correct, 45 spaces, 30 for the license, and then he's got the U-Haul as well to be included on that lot.
Oh, listen, I think we spoke of this at length.
Yeah.
I disagree wholeheartedly. I mean, we're picking up one, we solved the problem to now create a condition where we're creating another problem. But that's, like, I've said that a few times tonight, so.
Okay, is there anything else to be discussed here? If not, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with you, Mr. Petronio. Mr. Petronio, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm just struggling with it as well because give me a second.
Do a reverse roll call.
Yeah, let's do a reverse one. I need a, well, you know what? No, that's not fair to you guys.
It doesn't matter. I've got
It
my.
doesn't really matter. You know, I'm reluctantly gonna vote yes, only because it's gone through the staffing process. I do understand the concern on conservation, but I feel like we're gonna entail the same risk if we vote no, because vehicles could already park there. At least this way, there's control over what's parked there and it's permitted. So I'm gonna vote aye. Adam Petronio, aye.
Okay, so David Vieira votes no. And now you're gonna go from cars parked on that lot sporadically to cars parked there 24/7.
But at least they're inspected and they're gonna be according to the
Ones on
owner.
the road that park there sporadically are inspected too.
Right.
And my vote is no.
The regular vehicles that go throughout before they're even put here for sales, they're fully inspected. I distinctly remember the owner saying that.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Mr. Zora,
I agree with Mr.
Yes.
Petronio. Right now, any car can go there that's leaking oil profusely. But with this guy monitoring his cars, there shouldn't be a problem. Chris Zora, aye.
David Andrade, no, for the reasons that I've stated repeatedly.
okay, and Justin Sullivan, aye. So, okay, Mr. Sendian,
Yes, sir.
you're all set.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Okay, item B, open the warrant for the May 10th, 2021 Springtown meeting and close the warrant on April 2nd, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, this will give us 8 weeks here, so roll call vote, please, starting with you, Mr. Petronio.
Adam Petronio, aye.
David Vieira, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
David Andrade, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Okay, item C, discussion of the proposed asphalt and concrete plant at 45 Industrial Court. Mr. Kadim, can you please let in the department heads and chairs?
Yep.
Okay. I'm just gonna look here. And then before we get going here. Okay. Mr. Mr. Kadim, I think I see Mr. Schiller on. Do we have,
Dr. Schiller.
yeah, Dr. Schiller, I'm sorry.
Worked hard for that.
Sorry, Doc.
Richard, is that you that's on that says Walla?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right. We're all set. Okay. So for those that are watching tonight, obviously the asphalt plant proposed down there on the south end on 45 Industrial is of serious concern to all of us, all the members. I can tell you on the Board of Selectmen, based on conversations that we've all been having. Obviously, we're deep into the process here, but there's still a ways to go. I thought it would be beneficial that we get, the stakeholders from everywhere from the boards that are involved. I know there's been a lot of questions in terms of planning, where they are in their process. How did they come to their decision? Where they currently stand, or as that is Board of Health questions. There were some questions from them in terms of what their role is in the approval process, and of course conservation, as many of you know at this point, who still has yet to hear the applicant. So with some changes. So what I'm going to do today is we want to keep this as informational as possible for the residents, and I know that there's probably some from neighboring towns that are interested as well. So people understand what our process is here in town, some things that we are guided by, from whether it be through town bylaws or state laws. That it's a little different than what you may have in Rhode Island, a little different than what you may see in other towns. We're going to go through. I'm going to start with planning first, then we'll go over to Board of Health, and then we'll go over and wrap up with conservation, and then Board of Selectmen. If you can try to hold questions maybe until we get done hearing from all three groups, and then we can kind of ask questions to all three groups. Things that you may have for them, we can kind of state a little bit in terms of where we stand. And then I'm also going to read off, I have some questions from some residents, and in addition, we've got some residents that want to speak, and I'm going to open it up for some questions that may not get answered through this session, because some of the residents that are online as well. So, so bear with us. It's going to be a little bit of a process here. We'll try to get through it, but again, we're just trying to get the information out there so everybody understands what's going on. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Aubin. And
Before we do that, Mr. Chair, if I could, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what?
Before we do that, do we have, because I know there was some discussion about leaders from other municipalities, abutting the municipalities potentially being on this Zoom call. Do we have any? And if are you aware of any? And if so, if not, are there any that, and is there a way that they can let us know that they are on the call?
There's none that I'm aware of. If there are any in the attendees, if you could raise your hand and would like to participate in this call, we'll just kind of go through. Okay, I'm not seeing anything right now. So, okay, so that being said, Mr. Aubin and Mr. Sullivan, no relation. Can you guys walk the residents through a little bit the process that planning had to undergo in order to proceed to your decision on approving with conditions, et cetera, so that the public understands what took place over there, and any additional background that may be of interest.
Mr. Albert, would you like to walk everybody through it from the time they did the application in September and TRC right to the meeting?
Yep, I was just about to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The planning board received an application on September 22nd, 2020 for the proposed asphalt plant. It was scheduled for an initial hearing in front of the planning board on October the 13th. At that meeting, there was an initial presentation, a presentation of my staff report, as well as supporting documentation that had been submitted to the board. At that meeting, the planning board requested that notice be given to the abutting property owners. Under section 2.8, which is site plan review, that's the section of the zoning bylaw that the application was submitted under. The planning board can request notice go out to the abutters within 300 feet. 300 feet is the legal abutter requirement in Massachusetts. That was done for the November meeting, which was held on November the 24th. At that meeting, the board continued their discussion and review of the application. The applicant submitted some additional information with regard to the actual plant itself. At that point, at that meeting, there wasn't anyone from the public that spoke in favor of or against the application. And after that discussion, the planning board continued the meeting on to their December meeting. At the December meeting, because we were still waiting on a couple of points of information to see what the situation was with the wetland resources on the site, the application was continued to the January meeting. At the January meeting, further discussion was held, and the planning board ultimately voted to make a decision in a 6-to-1 vote to issue a site plan approval. With regard to the approval and what the planning board is reviewing when they review a site plan application, generally it's not whether or not a use is allowed there or whether or not a use can go there. It's how a use is to go there and whether or not the use meets the design standards as set forth in section 8 of the zoning bylaws of the town of Seekonk. In making that review, in reviewing the application and the evidence and testimony that was presented to them, the planning board made a determination and ultimately made a conditioned approval, listing a number of conditions on the application with regard to operations, with regard to pending approvals that were still necessary, and ultimately finding that the site plan as presented did meet the design standards as set forth in section 8. That's as far as process goes, the process that the planning board went through. Going forward, there are still reviews, as Chairman Sullivan noted, with regard to the Conservation Commission, with regard to the wetlands. I believe there's also reviews necessary with regard to reuse of the septic system on the site for the proposed use. And also, most importantly, in the primary permitting for a facility of this type in the state of Massachusetts, an application before the Department of Environmental Protection of the state of Massachusetts. They're the body that essentially issues the air quality permit, reviews the site with regard to emissions, with regard to generation of noise. What the planning board did is, in issuing their approval, is required that once and if the applicant is able to obtain their further approvals, they need to come back to the planning board and present a plan that's consistent with both their approval as well as the other approvals that are issued by the other jurisdictional bodies.
Okay. Can you, I think I may have missed it there, but how many conditions it said that you guys gave conditional approvals. Can you talk a little bit about the conditional approvals that were presented to the asphalt plant, and in addition to, well, just start with that. We'll just speak of the conditional approvals, please.
The approvals were, there were actually 14 of them. They related to pending approvals that were necessary to be done with regard to the site. Other approvals were standard ones that we have for any site, for instance, with regard to not posting a 911 addresses, as far and including and also covering hours of operation and operation of the facility.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit to because I think if I recall correctly in reading that there was a peer review involved in this process?
Yes, and generally with any site plan that's over an acre in area of disturbance, that's when stormwater review gets triggered at the planning board level under the town's stormwater regulations. We generally will receive a copy of the application, a copy of the drainage report, and then we have a rolling list of peer review engineers that we send the report out to. A peer review is conducted, comments are generated to correct any issues that might need to be addressed as part of the final plan. And basically there's a back and forth between the engineers until the site is confirmed to be in compliance with the stormwater handbook for the state of Massachusetts.
Okay, and was the peer review completed?
No, the peer review is still pending, which isn't something that's all that odd in a situation like this. Generally, particularly where there's still a Conservation Commission review pending. There was an initial review. There weren't any major issues that were identified as part of that review that indicated that the design was not going to be able to meet the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. And based on that, and not to speak for the planning board, but assumedly based on that and the planning board's confidence in the professional staff that the review would be completed as part of the final plan, they decided to issue their decision.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit so people are aware of the zoning in that area and what's, since it's zoned industrial, what that entails?
Under Seekonk zoning bylaw, we generally have only a few different zoning districts. We have 4 residential districts, we have 2 business districts, and we have the industrial district, in addition to a number of overlay districts that have also been adopted through time by the town. This property is within the industrial district. I know I've gotten some comments and had some correspondence with some of the abutters to the site and some of the concerned citizens and residents with regard to the site, referencing that the intent of this district was to be light industrial. The town doesn't have a light industrial zoning district. We just have the one industrial district. And as far as the land use table, in reviewing, I believe it's section 5 of the zoning bylaw, that lays out what the permitted uses are within the industrial district.
So bottom line is it's very general, very broad, and not a lot of restrictions in terms of what can go in and what cannot.
It's not an extensive list. There isn't an extensive list of different uses that are per se not permitted or permitted. It's kind of a general list of, and I can probably read off, and it's actually section 4, not 5. I could read off the industrial uses. There's only 9 of them: administration, research, manufacturing, processing, fabrication, assembly, storage, mini storage, and freight handling. So as you said, it's not an extensive list of uses. I would note that the zoning bylaw did undergo an extensive review in 2014, shortly before I started working for the town. That was done in coordination with a consultant. So it's not a situation where nobody's looked at the zoning bylaw in the last 40 years. This is something that was reviewed relatively recently. I will say that I've spent a lot of time, and in my time here in Seekonk, correcting a number of issues within the zoning bylaw, coming out of that 2014 review. But presumably part of that 2014 review, and I know when I've worked in other communities and have worked on zoning bylaws, and we've looked at major upgrades to the zoning bylaw, going through the land use table is something that's generally done. I can't say specifically it was done in this instance in the 2014 review, but given the fact that the town had a consultant on board, and I would have to assume that that was one of the things that they did as part of that process.
Okay. Maybe worth a new review now, I would suppose.
I think that's a bit of an understatement considering industrial. If industrial can be in what was intended to be light industrial if an asphalt plant somehow fits the criteria of light industrial, I think we have a problem.
As I said before, I don't think there's any designation for light industrial. There's only industrial.
I know.
And one other point with regard to the in industrial way and industrial court, what was known when it was developed in 1981 is the Seekonk Industrial Park. The site is the date that was in existence in 1981, or came into existence in 1981.
Okay.
I believe that was prior to those residential properties being built where they are, though.
The Jane Holland Place, I believe, was built in the 1990s to 1995. The first roadway acceptance project that I worked on when I got to town was actually Jane Holland Place,
Right.
and that was approved in 1995. And I worked on the acceptance in 2015, which is another editorial comment.
Okay. Mr. Sullivan,
Yes, sir.
is there anything else you'd like to add, I guess, to Mr. Aubin, and before I kind of move on to Dr. Schiller and the Board of Health?
No, I think John laid it right out for everybody, and it's just a matter of within the laws and regulations that the planning board has to work within. It was very limited, and where it's a by right use, we did not have discretion to prohibit anything. We could only condition. And that language is very specific in 2.8.2 of the zoning bylaw, as well as previous court decisions not involving Seekonk, but other places through the courts where the courts have upheld that take on site plan applications and site plan reviews, where it is not the duty or the position of the planning board to prohibit anything. They can only add conditions for the applicant to meet to further their process. And I also want to note that the abutter notification that Mr. Aubin noted was something that came out of our work to amend some of the existing language a couple of years ago, because prior to, I believe, 2019, there was no abutter requirement at all for a site plan application. We've even added, we wanted to add it to other things, but that was found not to be proper by the Attorney General's office. Just for a side note, editorial note there.
Okay. All right, thank you. Dr. Schiller,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
can you please lay out a little bit in terms of where the Board of Health, what their role is on approving what their segment is to make an approval for a property like this? Where the Board of Health currently stands and, in terms of their thoughts on the plant.
Sure. So we have yet to have this plant make it to our agenda. We discussed this last week at our last meeting as a new business item within the 48 hours of the scheduled meeting. But nothing has been officially put on our next agenda to my knowledge, but I'm still waiting on that final agenda. As far as what the Board of Health is able to decide as far as approving this proposed plant, it's my understanding that we actually are in no position to make an approval or any decision approving this plant. And in fact, I believe, and I'm sure that some members of this board will be able to correct me if I am incorrect, that the only way that I see the Board of Health really getting involved directly with this proposal is if someone in the town or one of the abutting towns raises a health issue that then we could weigh in on and make a decision. As far as the Board of Health is concerned, our discussion last week, in essence, has come to the conclusion, based on what we know with pre-existing asphalt plants, both in the United States and around the world, that there are a number of issues that raise significant health concerns regarding what is exposed to the water, surrounding water sources, as well as air pollution directly from some of the chemical exhaust that is out in the atmosphere. And I personally have reviewed the literature, and it's variable, but there's no question that there is literature that is positive for negative effects on the surrounding municipalities, the cities, towns, what have you, that are near these plants. So as a board, we discussed that we are not in favor, obviously, of placing a large in essence, chemical slash asphalt, whatever you want to call it. There's going to be plenty of badness coming out of there anywhere near the town of Seekonk.
Okay, thank you. And then you guys, when it boils down to it, you're just conducting inspections for septic Title V.
In essence, that's where our purview will probably extend unless there are instances of, health issues that may be raised by the either potential employees there or, more importantly, the residents of the Seekonk that would abut the proposed plant.
Those have
Would
to be
do-
made ahead of time, or can they be made, or do those have to be made after the fact, or can they be made ahead of time?
You can make them, there's plenty that can be made beforehand, absolutely, just general concerns. Unfortunately, I think that from the Board of Health standpoint, our hands are tied is in essence to say, well, they can't approve as far as my understanding of the way that the bylaws in Seekonk are written. I certainly speak for the board that there is nothing about this plant that is positive and from our end with respect to health concerns. In
So as
essence,
a
that-
resident, I'm going to make a formal concerned complaint right now to the Board of Health and state that I have an extreme concern with the negative health impacts that this is going to have on the residents. And I would like the Board of Health, if there is a method in which the Board of Health, as you said, if a complaint is made or a concern is raised, can implement any powers, then I would ask that the board do that.
I will do so. You are one of many who's already contacted me, both in Seekonk and the surrounding towns that also are affected by the plant. So I have instructed our health agent at the last meeting that we're going to start moving forward on doing whatever we have is within our power to halt this plant.
Dr. Schilling, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that any of the residents beyond the Four-Town Farm have well water. There is no town water that goes beyond Four-Town Farm, which is a grave concern for me. Obviously, if this asphalt plant were to contaminate the well or the groundwater, obviously it's going to affect these residents and their drinking water, which obviously we can't allow.
Oh, 100%. I'm quite concerned with the potential runoff into both the groundwater affecting the wells, as well as the water affecting the rivers and streams and everything else around that area, which then impacts the environment as well. So I'm concerned about both of those aspects with respect to the water. I've significant concerns as well with the air pollution. I think that would be much more rapid in the sense of how it's going to affect the neighboring people, because those are in some cases they're releasing benzene compounds which are clearly known to be carcinogens. And so I have more significant concerns, not that I minimize the water concerns, but the air pollution that is potentially going to be impacting the town of Seekonk, Barrington, everywhere else, is going to, in my estimation, going to be far more rapid, just because it's inhaled right away. The leaching into the water would take some time, but nonetheless would still be a possible problem. And then now I'm not even getting into noise pollution and all this other stuff and potential with the number of trucks and heavy equipment that's going to need to come in and out, which may raise a concern with safety issues with kids. And, there's a number of other problems that could exist. But clearly, Mr. Andrade's point of voicing my initial complaint, I have him in line with a bunch of other people, and we'll move forward on doing what we can and whatever power we have to try to stop this.
So do you feel comfortable enough to reach out to town council, obviously with the town administrator, and see if there's any sort of injunctive type methods that can be implemented immediately concerning, with consideration to the groundwater concerns for nearby wells?
From a health standpoint, absolutely not. I have no problem. We'll start moving the ball on that. I certainly think the environmental and conservation groups may have a little more impact with that, but I'm happy to move forward on that from the Board of Health standpoint.
You heard that, right, Mr. Kadim?
Dr. Schiller, you're 100% correct. Unfortunately, I live right here at the East Providence line, and we have this asphalt plant right over the line, and it is a nightmare. If they don't maintain those scrubbers as obviously they're required, and they usually don't towards the end of the year, it makes it almost impossible to breathe clean air for the most part. And I realize this is a much older plant. The one that's proposed is a newer plant, whether it's indoors or not. Obviously, they still have to omit some sort of exhaust. So I agree with you 100%, and obviously you're the expert.
Well, I will. I'll reach out, Mr. Andrade. I'll reach out to Mr. Kadim tomorrow morning, and I'll rope in Mr. Darling as well, the health agent, and we'll start creating a plan to do something to move forward on this faster than we were originally planning, because it wasn't on our agenda.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Petronio.
Dr. Schiller, also in part of that entire conversation, I just wanted to point out, I live pretty much right off Route 6 there, where it's going in, and I know what the wind is like. And I've heard it mentioned many times. However, I haven't been able to fact check whether or not that's a wind plane, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is, which would obviously exasperate the issue of air pollution from any industry that's in that area. I do know it has extremely high winds. There's a lot of cleared land, especially where the farmland is, so it's uninterrupted. And it's a high point, especially at afternoon when the sea breeze turns. That whole area does suffer from pretty high winds, pretty significant. So I just want to make sure that that's looked at as well. That might be a factoid that's very important.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything for Dr. Schiller? Okay. Dr. Schiller, thank you. If you can just kind of hang on in case we have some questions from residents, that'd be great. Ms. Miller.
Yes.
Hi, I was wondering, can you kind of walk the residents through the process here on conservation? And then of course, there's the most recent update with the applicant pulling their notice of intent, and seeking an A&R. So if you can kind of walk through your process, what the applicant's going to need to do, and where we currently stand.
Sure. So in terms of wetland resources that would affect this project, there are, and that's just to back up a little bit, that's our jurisdiction, right? Conservation may seem a little bit more overarching than that, but our jurisdiction is limited to the wetland resources that are on site and the buffer zones associated with that, or the habitat zones. So things like air quality and noise pollution, those might be a concern to some of the commission members or all of the commission members, but it's not within our jurisdiction. That goes through the separate state comprehensive permit process through Mass DEP. So as far as wetland resources on site, there is a potential vernal pool just off property that would still influence the sphere of development on that site. It has a 100-foot habitat zone that is a no disturb zone under our local bylaw, even as a potential vernal pool. And then there are also, as is outlined on the site plan, a wetland area. There's a point of contention between their wetland scientist for the project and myself as to what type of wetland resource that is. They have it flagged as an isolated vegetated wetland, or an IVW, and I believe it to be a bordering vegetated wetland, which is a BVW. for everyone at home, the big difference there is whether or not it connects, whether or not it has a hydrological or a water connection to another resource area. So in terms of where we are process-wise, as you indicated, they recently, the applicant recently withdrew their application. They submitted a letter to withdraw without prejudice. Their notice of intent that was before the commission. So process-wise, that for us, that's really all it means. They've withdrawn it. We don't know if they'll be coming back with a revised submittal or if they're reconsidering the site. We really don't have more information as to what the next steps will be for them at this point in time. You know, the wetland resources on that site have not changed. So if they intend to move forward, they'll need to file with us again.
So bottom line is they still have to come back to you guys.
Correct.
Okay.
Quick question. Did I hear you right, Ms. Miller? Did you, and maybe I misheard it, did you say that your review is, or your jurisdiction is limited to the site and not to component to resources outside the site?
No, just that it's limited to wetland resources. So even a wetland resource that's off property, like that potential vernal pool is off property, if that 100-foot habitat area from the edge of that potential vernal pool spills onto the project site, then it would still
Fall within your jurisdiction?
correct. Yeah,
Okay, that's what I wanted. Okay, so I misheard you then. Thank you.
no problem.
But it has to be within that buffer zone, correct, Ms. Miller? Not further downstream if we're talking, you know, down towards Barrington, was it 100 Acre Cove and all of that?
Correct. So when you get to resources that are not within the immediate vicinity that don't have an associated buffer zone, so like getting down to 100 Acre Cove, well, it would still have to be in Seekonk, first of all, for us to have jurisdiction. But let's say further down towards, because there's a bigger wetland complex further downstream. The way the regulation is written for the state act is unless and until. So unless and until it has an effect on those resource areas, it wouldn't be regulated for this project.
Oh, so only after it gets polluted is that you can then take action?
That's the way the state regulation is written, unless and
That's
until.
smart.
So at that, we run into it quite a bit when we have, let's say, erosion controls that are failing on a site, unless and until, if that site doesn't have wetlands on it and it's in an upland area, unless and until it impacts a wetland downgrade, we can't say that they need to do anything to fix those erosion controls. So it has an everyday impact as well. But yes, I don't disagree with you, but it's what we have to work with as far as the regulations.
So I want to point out 100 feet is not a very long distance when looking at a map.
And that was actually a point I wanted to bring up, Mr. Petronio, and only because you mentioned the feet. Mr. Kadim, Ms. Miller, maybe you can help me out here, but the minimum requirement for a butter notification, isn't it just that, a minimum requirement?
Yes. So
Isn't it within our, couldn't it fall within our purview if we deem a matter to be of highly sensitive subject to maybe increase that to a 1 mile radius? And I know I'm exaggerating with the 1 mile, but isn't it within our purview to exceed the minimums the same way you can with anything, because they're just that, a minimum? I don't know the answer. I'm actually asking the
I
question.
don't want to misspeak, and so I'm going to get you the right answer.
Is that a planning or is that a?
It's in general. It's in general.
In general?
Any sort of the butter notifications.
That's
I'm asking-
But I don't think it changes the underlying authority that planning or conservation has. So we'd still be dealing with the same issues.
You're 100% right. I'm only asking, like, in the future or on any other matter, if we know something is going to be impactful or have or something like this, the minimum, I believe that is just a minimum. I don't know for certain. That's why I'm asking for the clarification. And
So
if
I
it
think-
is a minimum and we know it's going to be a sensitive matter and a sensitive subject,
I
why
can
not
speak to
force
conservation.
beyond the minimum?
I don't want to speak for planning, but I can speak for conservation because the language may be different in planning.
Yep.
So for us, it's abutters within 300 feet.
Okay, so then it is 300 feet. There is no, it's not a minimum. Okay.
So it's within
Mr. Robin?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, as far as planning goes, it says shall notify abutters within 300 feet. But I will note, and I'm not sure what the source of Jen's jurisdiction is. That's a provision that's within the zoning bylaw. Site plan review in Massachusetts is kind of a local animal. It isn't driven by a state general law like subdivision regulations and subdivision reviews are. So we have the ability, or town meeting, I should say, has the ability to change that to say whatever the town wants it to say. So that could be a situation where we could put some additional verbiage in there to cover the issues that Mr. Andre was speaking of. So there, to me, it wouldn't be a necessary requirement that you couldn't do that with that language, but I think we'd want to put some additional language in there to clarify that the planning board may, in their discretion, require notice of a greater radius or something, some such language.
That would be true for conservation as well. It's in the local bylaw.
All right, so that sounds like again, another no-brainer to me, but I'm just one.
We can do, I would agree.
That's also separate from the 100 feet for the wetlands. that I
Yeah,
was-
those are just buffer zones. I only mentioned that, I only brought up the topic of the distance because when you said 100 feet, it just came to me.
Right.
I think
Yeah, you made the exact same point I was making.
I think it would be a different situation if we were talking about a zoning board application or a subdivision regulation, which again is driven more out of mass general law versus strictly out of the zoning bylaw. Obviously, it would be reviewed by the Attorney General's office as any other zoning amendment would be.
Just to touch lightly on kind of where we were earlier, David, when you had questions about protection of resource areas, maybe outside of the actual site or within the abutting properties. I know Richard Wallace, our chairman, is on, and he wanted to speak to the groundwater issues. So groundwater, we spoke earlier with Board of Health, and they definitely have concerns. Groundwater is one of the resource area values that is the commission is charged with protecting.
Mr. Wallace?
Good evening. Thank you for the invite for tonight's discussion. I think most of the attributes have been discussed by other individuals from the various boards. Conservation Commission does take many of those into consideration for a filing that comes before us, especially one of this magnitude. We look at the flora and fauna within the area and how either noise, light, pollutants that might be generated that would be so to those particular elements that could be affected. That could be dust, that could be some of the materials that come off of the site to other areas. To get to the point, and just to clarify, there is a term that they use when a site is contributing to something that happens to be outside of our direct, our direct area of enforcement and jurisdiction. It's called point source. So when somebody is contributing to something that is off-site, so to speak, is considered site point source. And at that time, the commission would take a look at it.
So, am I understanding you correctly, Chairman Wallace, that it's within it's within the Conservation Commission's purview that if they feel if they feel that the potential project could negatively impact groundwater, that you could deny any approval through conservation?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, and it goes back to what Jennifer was saying before, that the way the regulations are written, that our jurisdiction off-site, off of our direct, how can I explain this? When they file to us, they delineate the wetlands. that's where we have our jurisdiction. But should they be doing something on that site that causes harm within our jurisdiction downstream, it's called point source. We, at that time, have the ability to address the situation, whatever they're
Then-
contributing.
But something has to actually be happening versus.
Correct,
It goes
Okay.
to her comments of
Right.
unless and until.
correct.
Right.
So to the groundwater issue, yes, we will take a look at that. When something comes before the Conservation Commission, we look at a lot of different issues. We'll
Again, I want to ask the question clearly and simply, just so I can understand and anyone at home can understand, to not make it as complicated of a situation. If the Conservation Commission feels that the plant could negatively impact groundwater, could the commission deny any application before them for any of the wetland or resource reasoning?
I think that's going to become more of a legal question. However, when we have an applicant that comes before us, they have to, we don't prove to them that they are. They have to prove to us that they're not.
Correct. That's my point in
So
asking. the
that's
question.
what we would take a look at. We would ask for information, for data of what they're proposing on site, what are the elements they're going to be bringing on site, and explain to us and prove to us beyond a preponderance that it won't contribute to contamination of the groundwater.
And if the answer is not sufficient to the commission's liking?
We would ask for additional information. We do that quite often, especially on stormwater management.
And if, and I guess I'm not
It's-
saying,
it's-
please,
but
I'm not
just for
trying to tell you,
clarification, David,
I'm not asking
it's
you to
not-
speak
it's-
to the board,
it's-
right?
It's not to our liking, it's to what we can act with within the confines of the regulations.
Okay, and again, I'm not asking you to speak for the board, I'm just asking in a general condition. If those answers do not fall within the confines of those conditions that you can make your judgment, you could deny. Is that accurate?
It would depend on the situation at that time. I'm not
Understood.
going to say we could or we couldn't. We have to take a look at the evidence they've provided to us. At that point in time,
It would be within your purview to approve or deny, is my question.
I'm sorry?
It would fall within your purview to approve or deny. Like you do have the option to
Of
approve
course.
or deny. in
Of
that
course, on any
Right.
filing that comes before us.
Right.
We have the ability to either approve or deny. But if we deny, we have to have substance as to why we denied.
Agreed. Agreed.
I think it's important to point out too, on this particular application, what was filed and was withdrawn was a local filing only. So their contention is that it, in being an isolated vegetated wetland on site, they only need to file under our local bylaw. The state doesn't cover isolated vegetated wetlands below a certain size. So if it is proven to be bordering vegetated wetlands in a future filing, and that potential vernal pool is identified as well, that BVW being identified would push it to the state as well. A state filing still comes back to the local commission, but it's potentially 2 denials versus 1 denial, or 2 approvals versus 1 approval, right? So you approve under the state act and approve under the local bylaw.
Got it. Ms. Miller, can you, obviously, you have said that you don't have any idea as to why they pulled their NOI from the Conservation Commission. Do you have any suspicion as to why? And then I guess, if they go and they alter their plans, where does it go from there?
So I don't want to speculate as to why they withdrew their plan, but I am concerned that they filed for an A&R with planning after or around the same time that they withdrew their application with us. because that A&R is for a drainage easement on that property.
Got it. Mr. Robin, did you receive an A&R from the applicant?
Yes, not quite sure what the A&R is for, other than the fact that it is identifying an easement area, or really identifying a previous easement area that was shown on the original industrial Seekonk Industrial Park subdivision plan. I'm in conversations with town council whether or not this meets the requirements for an A&R. I think it's still an open question, and something that's going to be in front of the planning board in February.
Okay, so you have that, you have this for review on the next meeting in
Yes.
February? Okay.
Mhm.
And so with that, can you explain the approval process for an A&R, and if you guys deny that A&R, where it goes from there?
Well, an A&R is really an exemption under the subdivision control law. And the planning board's review and looking at an A&R is generally limited to whether any lots being created for development have adequate frontage and lot area. It's not a comprehensive review as to what or why the applicant's doing what they're proposing to do. I think the question for this is whether or not this proposed plan falls into that exemption. And then there's also, I think, a question in the review of the subdivision control law, whether or not they even need to file an A&R plan with the planning board, because the language of the Mass General Law states an applicant may file an approval not required plan, or a Form A plan as it's called, with the planning board. There's been some recent court cases indicating that may, where it says may, means may, and doesn't mean that they shall or have to file with the planning board. So I think there are a couple of issues with regard to that, notwithstanding the reason why what potential ulterior motive they may be recording or trying to record this plan for.
Got you. At any point here, does planning get another opportunity to meet with them with regards to any changes? Because if they're filing an A&R plan, are they seeking some revisions to their plan?
The area that's shown to be cut off as a proposed A&R lot is mostly outside of, there might be a small impacted area with regard to their drainage. I wouldn't say it's a significant, would have a significant impact on their site plan. But again, I think that's going to be a question for the planning board to decide to what extent and to where that line is versus significant versus insignificant change.
Okay. And does to your knowledge, obviously changes notwithstanding, of course, but does the subdivision regulations apply and give them this right here in this particular zoning?
As I said before, I think there's certainly some questions that the planning board's going to have to look at, and maybe have some input from town council with regard to the propriety of this A&R plan, and if it meets that exemption.
Yeah.
But again, there's also the question as to whether or not, even if the planning board doesn't approve it, can they turn around, just like, or even just to file an easement plan. The town doesn't regulate what town property owner grants another property owner an easement over their property. That's really a private relationship. But as far as the subdivision proposed A&R, I think there's some questions there that are going to need to be answered.
I think it goes without saying, please utilize town council to make sure that, we understand what what we can do and can't do on this process, because
Well, I think that's a good
There's
point of clarification, Chairman Sullivan. So, like, every one of our committees and boards are charged with the health, well-being of the residents and the town, right? So, I'm only speaking for myself, but I would think, and I think we've made it clear in the past, that we shouldn't limit ourselves to any sort of strict interpretation of the of any regulations or any understanding of those regulations, and fully use town council if we feel that we have anything that was against the well-being, health, safety of our residents. I wouldn't want anyone to feel that they need to, like someone said on Facebook a couple of days ago, stay in their lane, so to speak, simply for fear of any lawsuit or anything like that, because we're here as the town to defend
Yeah.
our residents and the town, right? So if we feel that there's something that will negatively impact it, listen, we have a legal line item for a reason, and let's use them.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Mr. Sullivan, go ahead.
just to expand on what Mr. Andrade was saying, when it comes to the planning board, we've had educational sessions with town council regarding land use law and how our regulations and zoning and such with that language, how that applies to some of the planning board decisions. And I've mentioned this previously. That has been used in court for appeal processes from applicants who have been denied because it's been cited as a reason to deny an application of any sort, not just the site plan, but of different things. And it's been pointed out by Koppelman and Page to us in our educational seminar that several times that the courts have ruled that that by itself is not the standard to use. It would have to be something else with it. In and of itself, it is not grounds to deny an application for the planning side.
Yeah, I'll just want to expound a little bit on Mr. Andrade's comments. And Mr. Sullivan, you and I had this conversation already, and then I've also seen people refer to it. It may have been kind of past practice, in certain instances to avoid litigation, which I think is certainly a good practice to have. But when we have projects that are put in front of us that are potential significant concerns to residents, by all means, and I think one of the things that I try to emphasize here is that we're all trying to work in the best interest of our residents. Obviously, residences and businesses. Sometimes these things merge, and we have to take a look at what we're evaluating here. And this is a particular instance where we have an impact to residents, environment, health, etc., groundwater, various things, right? So it goes without saying, if any of the boards or committees have questions in the future of projects that come across them, and what's under the purview, what can they do, what can be done, voicing their concerns, by all means, you need to reach out, and whether it's myself or any other member, phones are always open, and we need to have the discussion in terms of, what is needed in terms of those resources. Like Mr. Andrade said, we have a legal line item, for sure. We will utilize that, to defend our residents, and especially in this particular instance.
Let's not forget if we need to, we can transfer funds to supplement that line item if we need to.
Right. So there's that. Absolutely. So for those residents listening, watching, I think there's a process here that still is going to be ongoing over the course of the next few months between planning and conservation and health. And I can tell you that from the Board of Selectmen side, we do not have direct authority in this particular instance to approve or deny an application, of this particular business. It does not fall under our purview. That does not mean that we are doing nothing and we are wiping our hands clean of this by any stretch. There's quite the contrary. Over the last week, I've been speaking with all of the members of the board and working very diligently with the town administrator and department heads, the town administrator's office. There's been a lot of manpower dedicated in the last, couple weeks for sure, in terms of seeing what our options are. And we are still looking at a few things in town, and town council right now is, they're looking into all of our options as to what we can do to address this, proposed business, and to see if we have the ability anywhere, to get in the way of it, and to prevent it from starting, from opening and being built. That being said,
I think that's an important point there, though, of why tonight's meeting is set up the way that it is. And we intentionally invited every member of these various committees to have this conversation, not only for an update for the board, but also to express our support for anything that they may need in doing their research and taking the stances that they feel are in the best interests of the town and its residents, and that we're here to stand by them in those, and do what we need to do. I think when this first came aboard, and that was, I think, the intent of the letter that I proposed, that we send over to planning back, what was that, a month ago or a month and a half ago?
January 6th, to be exact.
A month ago.
Yep.
Was just that, to try and bring to light the issues that we have with a neighboring facility that's not within our control, and that was that the neighborhood came about after the fact, and the facility already existed. We have the opportunity to get ahead of this now, and I think every single member, and not to speak for every member of the board, but I believe every member of the board feels the same way, the same as Chairman Sullivan and I are saying right now.
Yeah. I think so. With that, if any other members have any other comments, what I'd like to do here is I have some questions from before I open up to some questions and some comments. Those were emailed to me, as well as a couple of the residents that may be online. Are there any other members that have any other comments that they'd like to add before I open it up?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Trania.
I just want to identify that we have, in our discussion here, if we can make a note of it, that the 300-foot zoning rule, however it's written, that within, as well as the 100-foot wetlands one, is obviously been identified as a very small amount, and that we in the future, or perhaps even for the spring warrant, we might want to put that on our discussion list in order to get that staffed.
I have that on my note of looking at the abutter radius. And Mr. Robbins, since we still have you on, if we can look at something with regards to, and I guess this is a good opportunity to speak to it, any zoning changes in terms of specifying this particular area for future applicants, of what we're, I guess, looking for or not looking for, and then maybe even considering an approval process that gets laid into it, where maybe potentially Board of Selectmen as a catch-all in these particular instances. If that can be reviewed and proposed for Springtown meeting, it would be appreciated.
Understood.
Thank you. And as I also wanted to just note for residents as well, let's look at the scenario where, it clears all the approvals within the jurisdiction of all the boards and committees here in town. Its next process goes on to the state. And based on my understanding with legal and everybody else here, is that the bottom line is it gets to the state, and it's the DEP, correct, Sean?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Goes to the DEP. It sits on their desk for 200 days at a minimum. So that's even before they start to look at it, it's 200 days. So if you're looking for, additional letter writing, they are the ultimate licensing authority when this thing gets done. They are the ones who are going to be, again, jump in here, Jen, but as I understand, they are the ones that are going to be going through the process of reviewing noise pollution, air emissions, all having to clear all of that to go through their approval process. But the reality, and as town council said to us, while it's still at least 200 days, it could be very much as a part of a year or more.
Mr. Chairman, just a note,
Mr. Sullivan, yes,
one of our conditions on the site plan approval was that, and it was agreed to by the applicant and their attorneys, that when the day comes that they apply for their permits to the state, to DEP,
Yep.
they will notify the town and the abutters within that 300-foot limit to notify them that the process begun with the state and detailing what they can do to file comments and so forth with the state, because otherwise it wouldn't be publicly notified.
got it. Thank you.
Just want to make sure that was noted.
Yep. So, that's where it sits on the state side of it. Needless to say, any zoning changes that get proposed and made for springtime, as it pertains specifically to zoning, it only applies, it grandfathers the applicant, the current applicant in, but it puts conditions on future applicants into the process. So it's just how the state, treats zoning bylaw changes. So I know that's been some question for people if we can kind of change it, but the state does prohibit changing the zoning on the applicants in the middle of the process. So that said, I do have some questions. Are there any other members that had any other questions, comments? Okay.
Well, as previously mentioned by several of the board members, I feel that we need to put our best foot forward, do everything we possibly can to support the residents and obviously protect the environment again, as we've been saying right along. So I'm all in favor. Let's go full speed ahead and do whatever we can to support the efforts.
Thank you. Okay. So some questions that were submitted, and I'll kind of go through this. First one, it's a group of questions submitted by Suzette DeCastro on Jane Howland. Her question was, can we rezone the industrial zone behind Jane Howland Place to just like industry, since it now abuts a residential community and now has a robust environmental habitat that includes endangered and threatened species? So I can kind of hop in here. We just mentioned that we're going to look to rezone it, but unfortunately it doesn't apply to the current applicant, but now we have Mr. Aubin and working with Ms. Miller, I guess, in this process, to address the zoning in that particular area. Next question was, knowing bylaw 1.2 and the importance of the health and well-being of the community, can we restrict a toxic asphalt plant from building in our community? I'm going to kind of defer this. Mr. Aubin, Mr. Sullivan, I think they're making reference here to a planning regulation here.
Yeah, and I think that goes to what we talked about before about the kind of general, health and safety requirements. Decisions that the boards make are in the best interest and health and safety of the town and its residents. And then that butts up against specific provisions in the zoning bylaw that speak to site plan review and design standards. And then it really becomes as Mr. Chairman Sullivan had mentioned, you can't just make a decision based on the general comments where an applicant's meeting all the other specific requirements. And I think that's what Mr. Sullivan was kind of getting to. When that gets to court, the court generally looks at that and says an applicant has met what you've set out and required, and by making those specific requirements, the town has said that's how you meet the general health and safety. And not to say that.
I think in this instance, this is a little different. You have a bylaw that you have a zoning area that was put next to a residential area, and you have the ability to challenge that here, where now you can use legal. And this is a perfect example, right? You can use legal to challenge that because you have a scenario where you're putting the health safety of the residents in the neighboring residential area, okay, is being directly impacted by this. And I'm going to use the word, and this is in no way meant towards planning, but or zoning, but improper use of the term industrial, right? And so use this opportunity to challenge it. Why limit ourselves if we can challenge it? I mean, legal precedence is made on somebody challenging a decision or that was made at some point. And that's why we have our legal line item, not only to cover us with decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis, but also let's not put our blinders on. Let's use it to test the boundaries when we need it to help the residents.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Andre, but again, I think it goes to where what we've been advised in the past by town council as far as what's an arbitrary and capricious action, and also what is preponderance of case law. And it would violate that practice.
And that's where I think Chairman Sullivan's comments earlier go, I hope are being heard and taken to heart, where let's not go based on, let's test the waters here if we need to. Let's not be afraid to have those discussions and go that route. You have a board that's here to support, that will support, I believe, and I'm speaking for myself, again, not every member of the board, there's been no vote taken, but that will support an action like that in this instance.
I understand what you're saying, and I understand, again, I spoke to Board of Selectmen Chairman Sullivan about a week or so ago on this matter, and a lot of what we talked with him and I talked about, I've said already tonight to the meeting, but it really comes down to where the way it was explained to us and the way town council put it to us, and the way that if you read the case law, the preponderance of decision is that really the planning board almost can't do that, because it would begin, you'd be getting into a willful violation of property rights and everything else, and that becomes a very dangerous area.
Well, I mean,
and I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with the form you're putting it in this case, because again, it's a site plan application, not something further. And the way that the court decisions have come down, it's very specific.
Well, I mean, I would disagree with you in that, simply because of the fact that we pay legal to make the arguments we need them to make.
Well, I would put it to you this way then, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Kadim, that the planning board from going forward have the discretion and authority to request town council for all commercial site plan application reviews, all preliminary, definitive, and modification of subdivision requests, all bylaw reviews and decisions and discussions and public hearings, and any other matters, including default proceedings that come before the planning board, and that we have the opportunity to request counsel for all of that.
You do have that. You just have to contact the town administrator ahead of time and let them know.
Well, I would say through the planner to the Board of Selectmen that we have council present for everything, for all of those every time going forward.
To Mr. Sullivan, Chairman Sullivan. So, as you and I discussed, I think, what the whole point being is that if you have things in hand, right, I strongly encourage that you reach out, on an as needed basis. If there's questions or concerns, or you just kind of have an inkling that there may be an issue, you certainly have the support of this board, especially going forward, to reach out on an as needed basis to Sean Kadim, the town administrator, if you are to need town council. I think it's to support, especially for instances, like what we're dealing with now, but, obviously things come up in the future, and, by all means, I mean, you guys are very versed in what you do. There's no doubt about it. But I think part of it is we want to make sure, as case law and things can change over time, that we're getting most current and up-to-date information, and you can send your concerns, either through Mr. Aubin over to Mr. Kadim's office, or even direct, whatever. But you can always have town council review if you have a question that you're faced with.
Well, I think for the board itself, I think we were comfortable acting in the way we did because of understanding the laws and everything that goes into it. And now through further discussion, it appears that there was some a different mindset, I'll call it, from that, and where we may have had or could have had options, and I don't want to phrase it the wrong way because I don't want to go there, but if the case is that there is some leeway or however you want to phrase it, that for legal action, a legal decision and advice, I would say that we have the option for the items that I discussed to bring them in for any of those items and just be able to bring legal counsel in and advise us, because if there are something that we're not attorneys and neither are you, to understand the laws and the nuances of what's going on, understand any changes or potentials, the right way to do it is to have counsel present.
But again, I think that there needs to be some sort of it can't be all or nothing. And I think what I'm saying with that is that there's a difference between a development that's going to go in, and that development is going to be located next to a sensitive area, right? And I won't go into the details. I'm just trying to give
Understood.
Compared to, I don't know, a 25-acre tire manufacturing plant that wants to move into town and wants to be built in the middle of a residential neighborhood that just so happens to be zoned a particular way. And I think we need to be able to use that ability to selectively pick when we think we need town council there and when we don't. And that's the point that I'm trying to make.
I think
the same
for us sitting where we are, I think it's a little bit different perception.
You drafted letters to the Board of Selectmen asking us to do more than that, which is why I'm just kind of saying, why not just do that? I mean, in the instance, for example, of the road openings, I mean, you've even addressed, and you and I have had this conversation multiple times over the years, where you've said it's in the greater good of the public to have the water and water available in these developments despite a moratorium. And we've had, and
but I think again, we're mixing apples and oranges in that case. I get the comparison you're trying to make, but it's not the same thing. And that's kind of what I'm trying to make.
It is.
Well, not from where I'm sitting.
You can test the waters. And I think the perfect example of what I mean is, in the past, you and I have had those conversations and you've made that request, and there wasn't the support that existed that we currently have now. But now we've had some creative thinking that has resulted in a different approach with some of the recent decisions that this board has made with respect to that road opening. And all we're saying is, don't just limit yourself to what you're being told at one point. And this isn't to you.
Right, I gotta say, just to speed up the process, is this something I like? Maybe we could, between John and I and Mr. Chairman and Mr. Kadim, we could sit down and talk about this offline and try and square it away a little bit better.
You know what, we keep going around Robin's bond here. I think the underlying current is there are certain boards and commissions that are afraid that if they make decisions, they're going to be sued. And you know what? That's a chance we all take. Anybody can be sued for anything at any point in time. But my point is, I don't think, Mr. Gadeen, you can answer this. I don't think there's any board or commission that's asked for town council to be present at any of their meetings and they've been refused. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think I've only denied one request for town council, which was clearly obvious because we already had issued a decision in authorization due to, I believe it was like an open meeting law question. So outside of that, the 7 years that I've been here, it's only been one.
Okay, so there's a positive, okay? So Mr. Sullivan, to you, David Sullivan, you know, that should ease any concern that you may have as to whether you're going to make the right decision or not. If you think that there's something that may be a catch-22, so to speak, and you may be sued, have town council there. You know, obviously, what steps you have to take. But to Mr. Andrade's point, and I agree 100%, listen, sometimes you have to test the waters. That's how case law obviously is decided. And, you know, we have, if you go back in the law books, you'll see that there is case law that refers to the town of Seekonk, where we've lost some and won some. So Let's go forward. Let's reassure the folks that have concern that we're with them, and we'll do whatever we have to do to hopefully right a wrong. Let's
Okay.
move on.
Very good. All right. Thank you. To keep the conversation going here, another question also from Suzette DeCastro here, second round here, she submitted, which was one, requesting a third-party review of the noise assessment of the proposed asphalt plant. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Miller, I'm guessing this might fall under you or Mr. Aubin, but this will be handled and managed by the state, correct?
That's, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, that is correct. And I did want to note that the noise is a general noise in Seekonk is under a general bylaw and not part of the zoning bylaw. It's a separate general bylaw and enforceable through that. Notwithstanding that, the planning board, as part of their decision, did make one of the contingencies that the applicant, should they operate that plant, operate it in conformance with the noise bylaw, in addition to any noise mitigation measures that might be identified as being required as part of the rest of the permitting process.
Mr. Aubin, do you know when they conduct when the state conducts its noise assessment review, is that done by a third party that's, state appointed, or is that applicant appointed?
I do not know the particulars of the third-party review at the state level. All I can say is that it really wouldn't be a third-party peer review if the applicant was picking it. So I would have to assume that if there is one, it would be done by an engineer, either that's employed by the state or a firm that was identified by the state.
Yeah, I guess I asked that question as some boards may say, and who is conducting this review? Who do you guys recommend kind of moment, right? But I appreciate that. So,
I think
okay.
I lost that point though, because that was actually, so the noise bylaw is a general bylaw of the town, correct?
Yes.
So is that enforceable by the building or zoning official, or is that enforceable? Who's that enforceable by?
I believe it's the police department, but I can pull up the bylaws and see who.
I'm not sure if
And
that
how
was,
do
I
you-
know there was some changes as to
It may be-
enforcement.
Yeah, it may be both
Recently.
the building inspector and police department.
Can a building
If I
permit,
may, I know I've had the building inspector do it, at least measure the noise in a certain
If I
area.
remember correctly,
I know
for the
they
bylaw study committee, when we put them through, the police were the default enforcing agency for all of them. And even in specific departments, if the superintendent of public works or the town planner or the conservation agent wasn't available, the police could enforce any of the bylaws if they were required to.
Okay. Okay, next question here. All the safety data they submitted was for the minimum that they would produce. What is the emissions for the maximum? Was any of that information included through planning, or obviously conservation hasn't seen anything yet?
As far as planning, the numbers that I think the full numbers would be seen more at the state permitting level, where they're looking at the air quality permit.
Okay.
The only thing that the applicant mentioned was that it was their production was going to be in the neighborhood of 300 tons a day. And they compared it to the plant that we've talked about now, the East Providence line, where that's approximately what that plant produces in about an hour. This plant was going to produce in a day. That's about the only reference that they did.
That's significantly smaller than the one that's in East Providence then.
yeah,
Yes.
but
Yeah, scale wise, it is
Doesn't
significantly
even
smaller.
compare.
still a lot
Doesn't
of
even
material.
compare it.
They're going to tell you anything they think you want to hear too. I mean, once they're in full operation there and they go over the 300 tons a day, what do you want to do?
Right, but
No, I
if you,
think,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if they violate the, whatever approval it might be, site plan, conservation commission, noise, general bylaw, they'd be subject to enforcement action. But again, I think that gets back to the unless and until discussion we're having earlier.
Right, they're already in place at that point.
Right, it'd be fines and whatever else in Superior
Right.
Court.
Right.
Adam, the one in East Providence can do almost 300 tons an hour if need be. Plus the silos, it can be pumping out some serious tonnage.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, so category 29, the anti-noise bylaw, item number 5 says it's the police department and any other town enforcement agency.
Thank you. Next question here regarding third-party assessment for health concerns, or I'm sorry, requesting a third-party assessment for health concerns for wastewater and air pollution. Consider both immediate and long-term effect. Is all this stuff, how is that managed? I guess, because I know that there's a third-party assessment or third-party peer process that can take place on conservation. What about health and water, wastewater, air pollution? Is that done? What part's planning? What part's state? Can somebody help?
The wastewater would be Board of Health. And I would think the general environmental review again would be at the state level.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if the question was trying to kind of get at with wastewater, if they're really asking more stormwater too. So stormwater obviously has to meet the state regulations and the federal regulations, and that all goes through the peer review process. So that peer review process is, what would you say, John, like 90% done?
Yes.
Planning. And then obviously wasn't started yet with conservation, but it would be subject to peer review at the commission's discretion. And I'm sure they would move in that direction if and when it comes before conservation.
Okay.
So, and in that peer review, they would be looking at stormwater and also the wetland delineation.
All right. Okay.
And Jen, what's the distance for the wetland delineation on that too? Is there a distance limit like you had for the, you previously stated 100 feet?
So different wetland resources have different associated buffer zones or habitat offsets, depending on what type of resource it is. But a lot of that is either regulated under the Wetlands Protection Act. So like the 100 feet you were talking about earlier, I'm concerned about it not being adequate. That 100 feet is set forth in the Wetlands Protection Act. Under our local bylaw, some of our offsets or structure limitations are a little bit more strict, and that's true of most towns that have a local bylaw. There are a few towns that I would say have much greater distances, or might be 200 instead of 100, but those are few and far between.
So what's our local bylaw offset? Am I asking the right question?
For the bordering vegetated wetland, it's 100 feet. There's a 100-foot buffer zone, and that's the same for the state and the local bylaw. For potential vernal pool, so talking about the two that are on site or that apply to this project, it's under the local bylaw, it's a 100-foot habitat offset, which is a little bit different. It's not a buffer zone. It's considered part of the habitat of that potential vernal pool, which is why that whole 100 feet is a no disturb.
So the 100-foot habitat offset, in layman's terms, can you explain exactly what that might look like?
Sure. So a potential vernal pool is basically a pond that dries up for part of the year. Really important to a lot of different reptiles and amphibians because fish won't eat their offspring. When you go from the edge of that pool out 100 feet, that's all considered part of that vernal pool habitat. And that all is a no disturb under our local bylaw.
So that makes a lot more sense now. Okay, that's what I needed to hear.
Whereas for the bordering vegetated wetland, it's graduated. So the first 25 feet in Seekonk from the wetland edge, that edge of the bordering vegetated wetland, is a 25-foot no disturb, 50-foot no structure. Anything inside that 100-foot line still has to be reviewed by the Conservation Commission, but anything between 50 and 100 can still have structures proposed. So if that makes sense, like in this particular project, there are stormwater structures that are proposed in that 100 feet buffer zone.
Okay, all right, and so this does fit that criteria. Okay, that's what I needed to hear because I wasn't catching that the first time around. Thanks, Jim.
No problem.
Thank you. Next question here is, how would this affect property sales and tax assessments? Hard to say. I think. I'm not sure there's any studies available, Mr. Kadim, if you happen to know of any out there, but
Yeah, I do not. I don't know what the impact would be on the residential value.
yeah. So, okay, next is really just a comment from a resident, Michelle Bean on 66 Blue Drive. Her comment is, I'm opposing the construction of the asphalt, construction of the asphalt plant in Seekonk. This plant will be detrimental for the well-being of our health, environment, and neighborhoods. There are residential houses right next to where this right next to where this location. I ask you to reject the builder's proposal, resident of Seekonk. So there was that. I want to turn over real quick to see, I have to pull up the participants here. We want to get some, we've chewed up a lot of time having some discussion here and trying to get some information out, but certainly want to turn this over to some residents here. So do apologize for the lengthy delay here in getting to you. Want to make sure we had all the information and some potential questions. We have a hand up here. Hold on one quick. Is Miss Cardozi, are you on right now? Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Miss
Hi,
Cardozi.
yes.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having this tonight. There's been a lot of information shared. I think everyone understands our concerns. Mine purely as an abutter, that's how it all started. And there were a couple of things I need to get in the record. We were notified before the November 10th planned meeting of planning. That meeting was postponed and rescheduled, and there was never any communication about that at all. And so that was the first problem. And so we totally missed November. So there were no comments because we were just trying to figure out what was happening. In December, I found out the day of the planning board meeting, and a few of us were able to get on that night. But it was, the applicant had asked for more time. So there was no conversation, there was no discussion. And so again, we had nothing to, we had no say. In January, we were available. We knew better what was going on. And we did have the comment, and we most definitely were not in favor of this in any way, shape, or form. For all the reasons that everyone has already clearly stated about the impact on life in this area. I've done a lot of research since then, and the impact goes so far beyond our immediate neighborhood. And so some of my thoughts on that are, you're looking at 2 states, you're looking at 4 to 5 towns, because it could conceivably have impact on some of the East Providence residents abutting 100 Acre Cove. And so it became a much bigger concern when I realized, between the health concerns, the conservation concerns, and then there's the practical things, the quality of life. We all chose to live in this area for a specific quality of life. So the industrial park's been there 41 years, and in the intervening years, the town has seen fit to surround that industrial park with residences. So that changes what you can allow to be in that park because of the impact on all the things that we've discussed. So I think you can't just say, well, the industrial park was there first. Well, the town agreed to let all of us live here. So it needs to be considered. And so that little phrase in the bylaws that, say you should be looking out for us, we take that quite seriously. And it was kind of disturbing that when there was clearly a difference of opinion and facts being bantered around at that first planning meeting that we went to, at some point there was conversation about maybe tabling it and talking to somebody else. And then all of a sudden, 1, 2, 3, a decision was made. And it was very clear that there were already concerns that this could be a gray area. And so those are some of the things that have been challenging to us, you know, as the residents in town. Something came up, you know, talking about the health symptoms, you know, the health challenges that people have if an asphalt plant is put in an area like this. The research has shown me that within 6 months of these plants opening, there will be substantial changes in the health of the general health in the immediate area. And as it continues to function, those become from minor things like allergies, maybe some asthma exacerbation, to autoimmune problems and cancers, especially childhood leukemias. This is really serious business. This is not something we can just take lightly. And, you know, I don't believe in running to court over every little thing, but I think there is a very legitimate fight here, a very legitimate concern. And I have to say, I felt that at that first planning meeting, I felt the burden was on us to have to try and do this. And that's not clearly the message I'm getting this evening, and I really appreciate that. You know, this is precedent setting. You know, if you allow this one plant, yes, you can make some zoning changes, but you know, what's the next one that's going to get challenged, and then you're kind of stuck with it. So it's another thing to think about. This is completely and totally different than any use that has ever been made on the industrial development behind us. So I think that needs to be considered. We have good neighbors in the businesses that are there. I don't know if you ever get any complaints. I've been here 10 years. I have not a one. And so, you know, they work well with us. Our wildlife is thriving. Something is happening right because nothing else is being affected in a negative way. So I think that needs to be considered. And things will never change if we don't challenge them. And what this town is all about, it has been an agricultural and a residential community predominantly. And so that's what most of us that live in this town have chosen. And this would change the entire face of it. And especially hearing what the other end of town, you know, the people, what they have to put up with the plant on that end of town, it certainly would not make any sense to do this. You know, the economical impact, it can't be minimized. It's not our only thought and it's not our biggest fight, but the average is a minimum 15 to 30% decrease in property value. And so that you can't just close your eyes to that. Are we going to get enough taxes to offset all the properties that are going to be affected, you know, the value that's going to be affected if this goes into place? I think, you know, those are kind of the newer things and the things that I haven't heard spoken about tonight that I felt was really necessary. There are a lot of people very committed to making this not happen for all the right reasons. It isn't just one person who's made a lot of noise. It's a lot of people that are really frightened for what this is going to do to their quality of life. And I did want to offer Barrington Town Council I was at their meeting the other night and they actually allowed me to speak. They felt, you know, I could bring some information. They are very much against this and they will be contacting you. They were unable to come to the meeting tonight. And I heard today that Swansea also is very interested in following this and participating. Again, they had a conflicting meeting also and could not be available tonight. So it's not just us, it's, you know, 2 states, we've got 4 to 5 towns or cities that are being affected by this. And I will work in any way, shape or form I can to support all of you in making the right choice for this town. And personally, I have a lot to lose by this ever going in, and I appreciate any support we can get in return. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Cardozi. I know you've been, you know, since the beginning on this, you know, you've been working very hard and appreciate you working with, you know, many of the other people putting together the organization for Stop the Asphalt Plant and stuff. You and I have been talking just a fair amount here the last few weeks here. So,
Yes, thank you.
and I know you've been speaking with Mr. Andrade as well and your son.
And
So,
Chris.
and Chris. Yep. So listen, we're doing everything we can, and obviously, appreciate you taking the time to, hop on tonight and let our residents know what's happening with the direct abutter to this situation, and really, your concerns on this. So,
Justin, I have a quick question for Sean. He made, just based on what Ms. Cardozi said.
sure.
Sean, is a neighboring community able to allocate funds to assist a legal fight?
I don't believe so. They would have to take it up on their ends.
Right. I
Like,
just
they'd
didn't
have
know
to
if you knew
take
that answer, right? So say,
Yeah.
say
They
Somerset.
wouldn't be able to transfer funds to offset some of the legal costs that we would have. They would have to take up and
Separate
pursue
fight.
a legal action on their own. But they really wouldn't have a legal action because it's not within their jurisdiction. So
Mhm.
That's why I'm asking if they'd be able to join the fight, so to speak, right?
So really their recourse, Sean, without having a direct impact to helping us, fight this, best direction for surrounding communities that are obviously against this and concerned about this would be where to go to Mass DEP at this point.
Mass DEP, and I would just get a letter of support just to get it on record for us to have on record. In case obviously it can be used if there is an illegal battle from the town's standpoint.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we have one more individual that's got their hand raised.
Yep. Hello, Mike, if you could please identify your first name, last name, address, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, this is Mike Bean. I'm at 26 Jane Howland Place. And a direct neighbor to Anne Marie. One of the abutters technically, but our property doesn't directly connect to it, but is very, very close. Echo a lot of the things that Anne Marie said. To address something you were just talking about regarding, well, first of all, I want to say thank you guys. You're obviously very dedicated. You guys are working hard and really considering this, and that's very much appreciated. This is my first time on one of the selectmen meetings with you guys, so I really appreciate all that you're putting into it. What I think is the first failing was at the planning board, because as Bruce Hoke, one of the planning board members, spoke at the meeting, that the charter of the bylaw is to protect the health and welfare of the community. So you have that authority to make decisions based on that. At the same time, I understand that, you've got an attorney presenting all these things and the threat of case law, et cetera. But there are many different cases, and there's plenty of cases that I'm sure support the decision to not allow a certain business based on the negative effect to a community. A number of residents in the area are attorneys and are weighing in from a legal perspective. We personally have hired an attorney. I believe other neighbors have as well. So we'll be contributing from that perspective as well. So just wanted to point out that I really feel like the planning board is where we're addressing our first focus, because that is where, from our perspective, the bylaw, as communicated by Bruce Hoke himself, was not being adhered to by that decision. One other planning board member verbatim stated on the record that, how do we make this decision without enough information? And prior to that meeting, the planning board had written communication from a number of residents, I believe 12 to 14 total, requesting additional time, stating that we wanted to secure legal counsel and that we wanted to hire our own professionals to look at some of the data points that were being presented by the project owners. So all those things were communicated, and yet, as Anne Marie stated, that we were just surprised that that decision was happening there. It was just premature. So just wanted to offer that perspective, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mike. I don't think I see anybody else. Do you, Sean? All right, that'll conclude. I don't see anybody else, waiting to speak here. I want to, first thank all the department heads and chairs that hopped on tonight. I really appreciate you dedicating the time. I know we spent a lot of time on this tonight, but I think it was extremely important that residents heard from all of you. So I really do appreciate it. And thank you to all the residents that also hopped on for this part, tonight as well. Hopefully we got a lot of questions answered. Hopefully you understand where, what we're trying to do here as a town, where the Board of Selectmen are putting their energy right now, trying to give support to all the other boards and committees, should they need it. And we're trying to do things as well behind the scenes to see, what our avenues are. If there are no other comments, by any other members, board members, anybody, I'm going to move on to the next item. Is everybody good? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think Anne Marie knows we've been going back and forth. She knows that we're gonna stand for our citizens' health and safety, just with the offline talk that we've been having.
I think you have a hand that's up, Mr. Chair.
MSK.
Okay, yep, got it. Hello, we have you listed as MSK.
Yeah.
Can you please identify yourself?
Sure. My name is Meg Kilpatrick. I live in Barrington, and I just had a question about if we have comments about the site design that was conditionally approved by planning board with respect to stormwater management. Can we raise that to the planning board department? Specifically, I was reviewing the site plans and I was trying to understand where the discharge for the 30-inch RCP pipe ultimately went to.
Hold on one second. John, are you still on? John Logan?
Hi, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Can everyone hear me? All right.
Yep.
We've set up through the administrator's office a comment section on the webpage specifically for this application. So if you wanted to submit that question, you can submit that, and that goes directly to me and I can respond from there.
Okay, I have a couple of questions regarding that. So I know it went through a peer review, but
yeah, if there are additional items, that peer review is still open, so we can include any additional comments, questions, concerns.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I think that now does it. So, all right. Thanks again to everybody. Let's continue on with our agenda this evening. Item D, consider accepting the Massachusetts Emergency Management Performance Grant in the amount of $4,600 for emergency equipment for the fire department. Mr. Kadim.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Burke, who's here to represent the fire department.
Good evening, board members. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good evening. This is one of the grants that we've applied for recently. We put in for, I believe, 6 within the last 6 months, and we've been successful 4 of them. So looking for your authorization to approve the grant for $4,600 from the Mass Emergency Preparation Grant.
So moved.
Seconded.
Captain Burke, can you just explain to the people what exactly you'll be purchasing and what it's used for, just so people know?
Yes. With the $4,600, it's a full reimbursement grant. So we're not using taxation money. We're going to be getting one emergency shelter. It's a pop-up tent that we could use for either incident command situations. A couple Scott bottles that the chief had put into the budget for replacement. We're going to be able to get that through the grant. Portable lighting unit, 5 helmets for ice rescue situations, and 1 60-minute Scott bottle, which will go on our fire truck for a RIT bag, which would be used if a firefighter is trapped or incapacitated in any way. We have a full setup that we would bring into the fire situation. So that bottle is just augment that equipment.
All right. When you say emergency lighting, are we talking like obviously that's not enough money to buy a lighting trailer. Is it just flashlights or?
No, it's just a, it's just a portable light that would be on charge on the fire truck at all times, battery operated. It's a telescopic light that goes up about 6 feet to help eliminate like an accident scene or a house fire.
Okay, and the pop-up shelter, is that going to be in a hazmat trailer or on a first responding engine?
We're going
one?
to try to fit it on the first arriving truck, engine 1, but
Okay.
it might be too big, so it might end up just going into one of the command cars.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. If there are no other comments, I'd like to do a roll call vote, please, starting with you, Mr. Petronio.
Adam Petronio, aye.
Dave Viera, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
Mr. Chairman, one last thing.
Hold on, Mr. Andrade, you're on mute.
I didn't realize I was on mute. David Andrew, aye.
Sorry, Justin Sullivan, aye. Yeah, Captain Burke.
Just a point of reference, we did apply for another grant through the state. Hopefully, we're successful with that one. That should be being awarded next week. And the chief has directed me to write a couple more grants for next year. So as a department wide, we are aggressively seeking any funds we can outside the town.
Good stuff. Well, we look forward to seeing you again.
Hopefully you will.
Are we looking at grants for foam trailers and stuff like that, or bigger apparatus, or is it just bring our equipment up to date?
Right
Or
now,
get new
we're
equipment, I should
concentrating on
say.
bringing the equipment up to date.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't, the problem is we're just space limited. So we're concentrating on the vehicles we currently have.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So Captain Burke, for ventilation, any EMS vehicles, does the fire department currently have any?
What are you referring to, like ventilation?
Like emergency air, basically for responding? I'm
Like,
thinking mostly in regards to the current crisis and whether or not the grant money can be applied for that.
no, I think what you're referring to is like an air supply vehicle
Yeah.
that would show up on a scene and fill out air bottles. We do not. We currently have enough air bottles that that we would need at a scene, and we have an air compressor back at headquarters to refill them.
All right, fair enough. Right.
Really, that's like a Providence, a Cranston, and Warwick to have those dedicated fleet trucks for that, right, Captain?
Yes, we are. If we need one, the closest one for us is Swansea, which we have used in the past.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item E, consider accepting the Massachusetts Office on Disability and Executive Office for Administration and Finance Planning Grant in the amount of $20,000 for an Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. Mr. Kadim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a grant that we've applied for. We've applied for some Americans with Disability grants before. We haven't been successful. So this is hopefully going to allow us to kick off some planning. And this also can be used for some programs as well. But we really want to take this opportunity to utilize this grant to kind of do a little bit more in-depth planning for the town, kind of identify what the needs are. And then going forward with other grant applications, we'll be able to tie this plan in with the grant submittals that we have. So hopefully we'll be able to leverage this grant with other future ADA grants.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right,
Thank you
roll
very
call
much.
vote. Roll call vote, starting with Mr. Petronio.
Adam Petronio, aye.
Dave Viera, aye.
Chris
David
Zora,
Andrew,
aye.
aye. Oh, sorry, Chris.
There we go. Justin Sullivan, aye. Item F, consider accepting the donation to the Seekonk Animal Shelter in the amount of $1,022.94 from Rocky's Ace Hardware. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call vote, Mr. Petronio.
Madam Petronio, aye.
Dave Viera, aye.
Azar, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Item G, consider accepting the donation to the Human Services gift account in the amount of $100 from Megan Lee Tooley.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr.
Madam
Petronio.
Petronio, aye.
Dave Viera, aye.
Azar, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Item H, consider accepting the donation to the Human Services gift account in the amount of $225 from Robin Lozito Real Estate, Inc.
So moved.
Seconded.
Roll call, Mr. Petronio.
Madam Petronio, aye.
Dave Viera, aye.
Azar, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Item I, consider accepting the donation to the Human Services gift account in the amount of $50 from Vasanti Mohan and Manshi Patel.
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded, however you want to put it. Madam Petronio, aye.
Dave Viera, aye.
Azar, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. To all those that have given donations to the Seekonk Animal Shelter and the Human Services gift account, thank you very much. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Item J, consider the approval of minutes from January 20th, 2021.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Petronio.
Abstain.
Dave Viera, aye.
Azar, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Community speaks. Do we have anybody in the audience that wants to contribute tonight? And I read the only comments that we received via email. So with that other business, there's nothing that I'm aware of within 48 hours here of the thing. Mr. Kadim, don't have anything for me? Okay,
Nope.
nope. All right. Town administrators report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only update that I have is just some COVID-related updates. Just want to, I'm sure the board has been made aware, or heard on the news that CVS will be opening their vaccination site in Seekonk starting February 11th. That's going to be the only CVS site in Bristol County as of right now. So we're thankful for that. Internally, the state did come down, I believe it was last week, all the days are kind of melding together now, but did come down with regards to the senior population phase coming in for vaccination. Unfortunately, the state, when they announced it, did announce that all the counseling on aging centers in the state would be able to assist with the seniors. Unfortunately, all these counseling and aging departments throughout the Commonwealth weren't given a heads up. So they were caught off guard when the information did come out. And unfortunately, it's a little disheartening to kind of see that transpire. I mean, when you begin to look at our senior center and our counseling on aging, we have 2 full-time individuals with a half-time position there. So 2.5 full-time equivalents. And we service not only the seniors, but other populations. As everybody knows, we are human services. So we deal with fueling applications, welfare applications, and it really runs the gamut. So we were a little disheartened to hear that there was really no guidance or discussion in advance of this rollout. I can say that I don't think any community had really anticipated when COVID initially started that the municipalities would be doing vaccination sites. With that being said, we've worked diligently internally to really kind of discuss potentially opening up a site for vaccination. We've worked, we had a meeting on Monday with Chief Rave, Tim Goodwin, who's the EMS coordinator, who's done a phenomenal job. He played an integral part in doing our public safety vaccinations with Plainville. We've worked with Brian, who's the interim health director, who has a vast knowledge and has been in contact with a lot of different health departments. And then Brittany Ferrier from Human Services, who's also been talking to her colleagues throughout the state. So we're anticipating and trying to set up a clinic that would be serviced at the senior center since the senior center is closed. Vaccines would be given out by our paramedics. We're still working out the logistics. There's a ton of logistics that goes into this. Aside from the funding aspect of it, we are talking obviously about the manpower, computer systems and monitoring systems with regards to the vaccinations, the storage of vaccinations, as well as, getting the list of individuals. For municipalities, as it currently stands, we will only be given 100 vaccines per week. So that is into play. So we're currently looking at storage, looking into a freezer that would meet the requirements for the storage of the vaccinations. If we do not get this freezer, then we would have the opportunity to work with North Attleboro to get those vaccinations stored with North Attleboro. But unfortunately, we only have the ability to transport one other time once the delivery is taken. So we got to be very, we've got to be very technical with the logistics of transporting the vaccines, making sure that we're not wasting it. So we're currently in the process of trying to identify and secure a freezer that would be able to be procured and stored over at the senior center to control and hold the 100 vaccines. So we're gonna actually circle back. We have another meeting scheduled for Monday. We believe FEMA, which will be on a FEMA call tomorrow, will be reimbursing what we believe is 100%, but we're not quite certain yet until we get on the call, but 100% of the clinic. And if that's the case, obviously, that would help us immensely with regards to the overtime that's going to be required for paramedics and the various staffing that we're also going to need at the senior center. If FEMA is not fully reimbursing, we will be looking at CARES money and then also trying to offset some additional monies within our operating budget for this fiscal year. But we'll have more information after Thursday and when we circle back on Monday, because there was a list of questions and operational items that we needed to get answered before we could really identify where this is going to go. But hopefully we'll be able to address that. The other issue with regard to this rollout was that originally seniors were required to put their names on a waiting list via the internet. So the problem is that with that population, unfortunately, a lot of the seniors are not tech savvy or do not have connection to a computer or to the internet. So that was creating somewhat of a concern for us as we were trying to assist with some of the seniors. And part of the larger problem is that you have to have individual emails every time you register. So it wasn't like we could put in a template, create a template email for the senior center and allow them to continuously input different individuals for the vaccines to get them on the list. And once you're registered, it takes about an hour, 2 hours just to get a confirmation that you've been registered. And then you get multiple notifications to say when you'd be available to, or when you're on the list to receive the vaccines. The state thankfully recognized, based on a lot of complaints that were coming from counseling on aging centers, the need to change that. So they did create a telephone system, and they have also changed it so now that we can create and utilize one email. So if folks do come in, we can get them on a waiting list and input it with one email, and we can monitor the emails coming back a little bit more efficiently. So hopefully, we'll get this worked out and streamlined, and we'll be able to, at some point, hopefully vaccine, 100 residents a week at the senior center.
Does Seekonk residents take priority? I know you said it's the only one around, or is it just
on the CVS or the town vaccination?
Well, I guess both. CVS, I would assume.
Yeah, CVS. I don't believe there's a town priority, but for the one that we're going to be running internally, we're going to keep it specifically to town residents.
Only.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as you said, there was 100 vaccines per week. Is that the funding just for the senior center clinic that we're setting up, as opposed to what CVS is going to offer?
Yeah, so CVS would have their own. So I believe they get a larger quantity and doses, but the state, as they're rolling it out to any clinic that's being run by a municipality. They're only allowing 100 vaccines a week.
And which one is it? Is it Pfizer or Moderna? Do you know?
For us, would be the Moderna, and in particular because of the the storage and how that doesn't need to be as stored as cold as the Pfizer one.
Yeah, the Moderna ones though.
Sean, maybe one of the things you want to mention too is, I know people are proud of the fact that they're getting the vaccine, and they're quick to put on Facebook or social media their certificate saying that they got it. What you need to remember is there's very pertinent information on that card that you may not want people to get. So
That's a good point. That's actually hitting social media and the news right now with folks just taking those pictures and people's identity theft just going through the roof with regards to that.
Yeah, Sean, I just kind of want to make a quick comment to, and especially acknowledge the efforts that Brittany's been putting in over the last couple of weeks, trying to sort through all of this as it's been coming down blindly from the state, and she's been having to pivot and make do with what she's got. And I think that there's understandably, residents have been wondering what our plan was, and we're going to do a better job communicating that out once it's, finalized. I know she's been working on it, and she's been trying to do her best, and you have been working with the rest of the, relevant department heads and trying to work this out. So first I want to, thank you, and, obviously Chief Rave, and I think you said to me the other day that Tim Goodwin was in on the conversation, and Health Department with Brian Darling, and obviously Brittany and those involved, because this is a logistical nightmare to try to put together. So it doesn't happen overnight. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes. So communication out to the residents. You guys will be receiving something soon, but I know you guys have all been working hard, and again, please pass along our kudos to Brittany for the work that she's trying to do behind the scenes, especially to get the seniors registered, or at least get them on a waiting list for whenever we do get it. Now, granted, 100 shots a week is, not much at all. So hopefully that, the governor can make some changes to that, or the supply can change and improve that situation. But that's what we're dealing with right now. Can we get, as an aside to this, and you're speaking of the allocation of shots to Seekonk, can we get an understanding in terms of other communities like Attleboro? I know you and I had talked about Fall River, how it's being more privately run, but can we get an understanding in terms of like Attleboro, maybe a larger community, call it Foxborough or Plainville, or somebody who's, what kind of allocation they're getting, and if there's any rhyme or reason in terms of who's getting what and why?
Yeah, well, I'm going to have Brian, who again has done a phenomenal job filling in for Jess Hosman in that vacancy, but he really has gone above and beyond to stay on top of all these items and still try to manage the office. But we'll have him go out and get that information. That was one of the questions that we had initially talked about on the call. So hopefully he'll be able to find out exactly what the quantities and the reasoning behind why only 100 doses, and it may be 100 doses, and that may not include the second dose. So we might get another 100 for any individuals that are on the second dose. So, at best, the initially will be 100 vaccines, may be up to 200 with second doses. So we're still looking to get that clarified as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any other questions with regards to the vaccination process? Okay. Sean, do you have anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay, Board of Selectmen liaison reports and comments. Bristol County Advisory Board, there's nothing. Aiken School expansion, Mr. Zora.
Nothing new at this current moment.
Okay, thank you. 540 Arcade Ave, Mr. Vieira or Mr. Kadim.
Oh, I have nothing new to report, Sean. I don't know if you went to the last meeting or not.
Yeah, I did. So we just went over the HVAC setup system. So there was some discussions and explanations and some tweaks that were coming out of that. So we're still making progress with regards to the design.
Thank you. Veterans Council, Mr. Vieira.
Nothing new to report. We haven't met, obviously, because of the COVID. We will be meeting shortly to discuss the plans for the Memorial Day Parade, if in fact we're going to have one. So stay tuned.
Okay. South End Fire.
Nothing new to report. We are meeting next week. Obviously, we are in the process of receiving the RFQs for the project manager. So again, we'll have more to report by the next selectmen's meeting.
Okay,
Sean,
thank you.
unless you have anything to add to that.
No, just a reminder that in line with what you saying, the bids closing is next week, next Wednesday, February 10th.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to go around the horn here for any kind of Board of Selectmen comments. I'll start with Mr. Petronio.
Nothing new. We're just waiting before adding the open space and recreation plan to the Board of Selectmen's agenda. It's probably in the 80% process. So more to follow.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vieira.
Just one thing, I think tonight's meeting over the asphalt plant was very productive. But it seems like we're managing by crisis. And I know that wasn't intentional, but I think more meetings like that with the general public with issues of concern for them will go a long way. I would like to see us do that. And listen, there's no way I'm suggesting that we go to more meetings, but again, I think it was very fruitful. We're always asking people to get involved, and what better way to get people to get involved than to be out there in their face, asking what their concerns are and getting them to come to the table.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Zora.
Yes, regarding the snowstorm the other day, it was nice to see an email, a very positive email from a resident saying how they did a good job. I had forwarded that email to Mr. Gadim, and it was just great to see.
Thank you.
Yep. I think we all kind of got the same email too, so hopefully it's been conveyed. Mr. Andrade. You're on mute.
Nothing at this time.
All right. Just one last thing to note with the asphalt. I do appreciate, we've got a number of emails over the last several days, needless to say, from concerned residents within our community and in surrounding communities. It's good to see the community kind of getting together and working together on a cause, and I do appreciate all the emails that we received. So that's about it from me. If there's nothing else from anybody else here, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. No executive session tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I just got a text. Were you supposed to read the individuals who donated for Remax? Do you have that list?
Give me 1 second here. Okay. Okay, so she needs me to read them out individually here. So on item, so it was item H for the donation for the Human Services gift account of $225 from Robin Lozito Real Estate. This is actually from from Remax, and the following members from Remax are Robin Amaral Lozito, Deborah Love Green Donahue, Lisa Halako, Patty Bain, Jean Durham, and Missy Rose Benson. So thank you to all those that contributed to the Human Services gift account. Sorry I didn't get that right earlier. I missed that. So now I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Roll call vote, Mr. Petronia,
Adam Petroni, aye.
Dave Viera, aye.
Mr. Zora,
Chris Zora, aye.
David Anderday.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Thank you, folks. Have a great night. We'll see you. And next meeting has been moved to February 24th, so it won't be on the regular meeting of the 14th.